I'd like to now open the floor to Mr. Ian Fieldies. Ian is a distinguished researcher. He's a doctor in electrical and computer engineering. He's the founder and editor-in-chief of the newly established ITU Journal on Future and Evolving Technologies. Currently, he's the president of Truva Inc., based in Atlanta, Georgia. He also serves on the advisory board for the newly established Research Center Technology and Innovation Institute, TII, in Abu Dhabi. And his research interests include 6G, SG wireless communication systems, terahertz communication, Internet of Bio-Nano Things, molecular communication, reconfigurable intelligent surfaces, nano networks, among others. Welcome, Ian, to AI for Good.
Thanks a lot, Jennifer, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night all around the world. I'm very pleased to be part of this distinguished panel webinar. And my talk will be from the communications perspective regarding the metaverse. So Neil tried to give a very complex definition of the metaverse, and let me simplify it and then see what I think about metaverse. Meta stands for beyond from Greek, and verse is from universe, which is originated from the science fiction novel Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson almost 30 years ago. And the metaverse is a network of connecting physical and virtual worlds seamlessly, as we see here. On the left-hand side, the physical world, like the eye and eyes, and then we have all these kind of like the truly immersive experiences for a plethora of use cases using like holographic type communication, extended reality, which is the umbrella terminology for virtual and mixed reality and augmented reality, and bunch of legacy gateways for communication networks. And then we create a world of which is called metaverse, where there is no separation between virtual and physical world. And this is thanks to the convergence of key emerging technologies such as extended reality and holographic type communication. And so in my opinion, the metaverse is sitting again, I'm really trying to simplify the entire metaverse world. So there are so-called M worlds, like metaverse worlds, work productivity, interactive gaming and learning, e-commerce, real estate, fashion, shopping, tourism, name them. I mean, by no means this list is complete. And then another pillar is the Web 3.0, which is based on these futures like decentralized and autonomous, heavily based on AI and machine learning technologies, as well as blockchain, cryptocurrency-enabled, intelligent adaptive applications, and semantic technologies. And another pillar is, as I mentioned before, extended reality as well as holographic type communication. And the metaverse worlds, there are many platforms. I have some of them here. There are really hundreds of them in the meantime, capturing all bases in our lives, from the gaming, from real estate, fashion, name them. And they're really very lucrative companies. And hopefully some of the young people will look into this and create more metaverse. And the market is huge. Like it is expected by 2025, like almost $500 billion, maybe more. I'm not an economist, but there's a huge market in the metaverse world. And of course, we're talking about, again, from the hardware and software perspectives. And I will mention some of the lack of the hardware as well as for the communication aspects, plus, of course, all the software needed for the metaverse to be realized. And you see here a kind of like vision. Again, by no means is a complete like set of applications like telepresence, healthcare, education, automotive industry, entertainment, and industrial automation. And underneath this, you see a bunch of like hundreds of different applications. And the services, again, they're building on top of this metaverse world. Again, extended reality as well as holographic type communications. And the technologies that we will be needing for this are like maybe 5G, but 6G and beyond wireless systems, new backbone network like internet, kind of like new internet, you can say that, high precision networking, federated networks, edge intelligence. I will mention why we need edge computing and edge intelligence, and semantic technologies. And of course, all these technologies are sitting on top of security, privacy, and trust. All my other colleagues in this panel will talk about heavily on the security and privacy issues, and AI and machine learning. So, so I'm focusing on the communication aspects in terms of extended reality and also holographic time communication. If you're interested, we have these two very detailed papers which we publish in the ITU Journal for Future and Evolving Technologies Journal in April and August this year. We tried again to cover all the bases from the communications perspectives. So there are many details in these papers. So what is extended reality is, as we all know, that human perception of real objects is based on 5 basic senses like sight, hearing, touch, smell, and taste. And the virtual reality, this is from the paper back in, again, almost 30 years ago, 1994. That's the reality virtuality continuum. On the right-hand side, we have the virtual reality here. which is all the virtual objects are digitally created to represent the same real senses and environments. And on the other side of the spectrum is the real environment. In between, we have the augmented reality and augmented virtuality, meaning that if we have low percentage of virtual contents, we're in the domain of the augmented reality. If we have high percentage of the virtual contents, we're in the augmented virtuality. And of course, if you have 100% virtual contents, we're in the virtual reality domain. And as I told you, that the entire umbrella terminology is called extended reality. And all these new technologies like AI, machine learning, IoT, I will not use 5G, like 6G and beyond, will make these realities possible. And there are a plethora of use cases like the pattern language. You see here, maybe I should not go through all of them, but like we can use them in entertainment, sport, healthcare, tourism, education, and e-commerce, in automotive industry, health industry, and like the tourism, real estate, gaming. So they're all here. So there's a really very long list of applications that we may use these technologies. And the other case is so-called holographic type communication. That is, a hologram is a photographic recording of a light field, which consists of 3D virtual images that reflect real physical objects, preserving the depth, parallax, and other properties of the original item. Here we see like orange and apple, and then we have a bunch of cameras, and then we see these fruits like as if they are real in front of us. So holography is a photographic technique that records the light scattered from an object and then present it in a way that appears in 3D. Again, this technology is existing since many years, but it's really still primitive. Like for example, in Las Vegas, there's this Whitney Houston concert, or really it's a show in Caesar's Palace, as I can recall. I was there in May. I didn't go to the show, but also like ABBA gave a holographic concert back at the end of May in London. That was a huge success. But still, it's under progress, really. And as you see here, we can have these soccer game as if it's in front of us, or some boxing game, and also some meetings. So it's a fantastic technology, and I hope this will be realized within the next 10 years, in a more sophisticated way. And I also mentioned to you about these 5 senses, and holographic type communication will cover sight, hearing, touch, smell, and taste. And extended reality, all of the above without the smell and taste cases. And then the other ones are known, like audio, video, etc. And so you see also this backbone I'm talking about from the communications perspective, as you know. So wireless and wired networks will be used to realize these communications for the extended reality as well as holographic type communications, including these 5 senses, right? It will be an interesting challenge, as you can imagine. So you see there are a bunch of these on the right-hand side, wireless technologies in all areas: maritime, indoor, outdoors, terrestrial, air, and space, backbone like internet, and then many applications. I just showed a couple of them here. And of course, the basic architecture in an abstract way, we have a project called Holo for All to make it cheap, affordable communication architecture for holographic and also extended reality. They're all based on AI and machine learning, all this software, and also hopefully the hardware that will be developed over the time. So due to the time constraint, I would like to talk about what are the challenges, again, in a nutshell, from communications, networking, and computing perspectives. So first of all, we have extremely high data rates. That means we need terabit per second communications, and today's networks, wired or wireless, they cannot satisfy the quality of service, quality of expectations of these applications. Moreover, they have very strict low latency requirements, and 6G and beyond, as well as the internet, need to be upgraded. And also we have, based on the use cases, we have these semantic notions. So far, we have always like syntactically checking the digital bits, what are zeros, kind of like error control. And then we decided, is there an error or not? But now we are talking about from the semantic perspective. Is it sent what we received in terms of semantic meaning? So that's a huge research area that people are looking at currently in the communications domain. And also high precision communication networks, meaning how will we take care of the strict latency requirements, like in terms of like congestion control in the networks and packet drops, and also predicting the network load, wired or wireless. And also federated networks and also AI and machine learning empowered networks are challenges and very exciting problems in that domain. And then when we look at the server and user devices hardware perspective, like how will we realize this multimedia transmission, right? And also synchronization between these different senses. How will we predict the user motions and also the video capture, synchronization, display, and how can we reduce the very, very large number of cameras if we use holograms? And so this is, again, by no means complete, by the way. So in the paper, we discussed all of them in detail. And then also edge computing is a very hot topic in communications, especially when we have these latency requirements. When we go end to end, good luck, right? Because the delay, the latency will increase incredibly. That's why people are trying to do some edge computing, edge intelligence in order to reduce the latency plus all the complexity of this data processing algorithms, data compression, decompression, etc. And so there are, I mentioned to you, the current technologies cannot satisfy the requirements. You see here the data rates in mixed reality and augmented reality, 35 megabit per second to 15 gigabit per second. But when we go to holographic type communication, we jump to 1 to 10 terabit per second. Latencies like 10 milliseconds, but will go down to less than 1 millisecond. Synchronization, like thousands of these views and senses, and devices like, can we do naked eyes and also head-mounted devices? But also there are many problems how we can design these head-mounted devices the most sophisticated way. And the future looks like this, ultimate mixed reality, virtual reality, and holographic type. So we're talking about 1 millisecond, and the data rates are like many terabit per seconds. And stage 1, we are currently around here, like this, around 10 millisecond. We are happy if we can get these latencies. So the last slide is about the software developments, like protocols, like all AI and machine learning empowered solutions, like the transport layers. These are existing, but they are by no means they're enough. We need new transport layer solutions, as well as the network layer, new IP design maybe, and in physical data link layer, there are tons of problems. Again, I ask you to look at our papers, and you can see more details about the challenges and all these other technologies, as well as power consumption, weight reduction of these head-mounted devices, for example, the mobility effects, and also collaboration and metaverse. So I thank you for listening. I hope I'm on time. So
you're perfectly on time. Thank you,
okay,
Ian.
great. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian, for that look into the many dimensions of the metaverse and the technologies that we need to enable it with, AI and others. I think HTC is very exciting. I'm sure we'll have some questions about these technologies later on in our session. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Welcome to AI for Good, the leading action-oriented, global and inclusive United Nations platform on AI. Organized by ITU, in partnership with 40 UN sister organizations, and co-convened with Switzerland. The goal of AI for Good is to identify practical applications of AI to advance the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and scale those solutions for global impact. In today's session, we're counting on you to use the live video wall feature to ask questions and post comments to help create an engaging discussion. We encourage you to stay until the end to chat, connect, ask questions, and network with our distinguished panelists and world-class AI experts in the neural network. It is now time to kick off the session and welcome our first speaker. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Anna. Welcome everyone to AI for Good, the webinar series where we explore the role of AI in the advancement of the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. My name is Jennifer Woodard. I'm an AI researcher and entrepreneur and co-founder of Insight Intelligence, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. Now, we have an extremely interesting edition of AI for Good for you today, a very special one indeed, as we will be welcoming a star-studded panel of industry leaders, researchers, experts, and thought leaders who are shaping the present and the future role of AI in the next generation of our online lives. That's the metaverse. Now, today's session builds upon the fascinating discussion we had with international experts in May of this year, in which we began to delve into the important role that AI will play in the metaverse. Now, in this edition, we're going to delve even deeper into this topic, and it's covering so many different dimensions, from security to online safety to multimedia data analytics, integration with other emerging technologies, and so much more. And we'll be hearing about all of these themes and others from our distinguished panel. Then you will also have the opportunity to interact with the speakers after their presentations in our Q&A session. So speaking of our panel, I'd like to introduce you to each of them right now. We have Mr. Neil Trevitt, Vice President of Developer Ecosystems from NVIDIA and Chair of the Metaverse Standards Forum. We have as well Mr. Ian Achildes, Founder and Editor-in-Chief of the ITU Journal on Future and Evolving Technologies. We also have Mr. Andrew Plato, who is the CEO of Zenacity. Ms. Kavya Perlman, she's the founder and CEO of XRSI. Later joining us, we will have Mr. Misha Doler, who's a chief architect at Ericsson. And finally, we have Ms. Melty Tantawanich. She's a co-founder and creative director of Routiverse and member of the Global Esports Federation Metaverse Council. Thank you all for being with us here today. It's a privilege to have you here on AI for Good. Now, we have a lot of fascinating material to cover, so without further ado, I'd like to welcome our first speaker, Mr. Neil Trevitt, Vice President of Developer Ecosystems at NVIDIA and Chair of the Metaverse Standards Forum. At NVIDIA, Neil helps enable applications to take advantage of advanced GPU and silicon acceleration. Neil is also the elected president of the Kronos Group, where he initiated the OpenGL ES standard now used by billions worldwide every day. He helped catalyze the WebGL project to bring interactive 3D graphics to the web, fostering the creation of the GITF standard for 3D assets. He also chairs the OpenCL working group, defining the open standard for heterogeneous parallel computation. And he helped establish and launch the new generation Vulkan API. Before NVIDIA, Neil was at the forefront of the Silicon Revolution, bringing interactive 3D to the PC, and he established the embedded graphics division of 3D Labs to bring advanced visual processing to a wide range of non-PC platforms. Welcome, Neil, to AI for Good. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Jennifer. Sorry to make you read out that long presentation. That was too much detail, but let me share my screen. All right, and get this going. All right, can you hear me okay? And can you see my slides? Okay, so I'm very happy and honored to be here, part of this great event today. I'm going to be talking about a new organization, which is the Metaverse Standards Forum. I'm going to be covering three topics: why interoperability standards are going to be vital to building an open and inclusive metaverse, and the role that the Metaverse Standards Forum is trying to play to enable a broader cooperation around interoperability, and of course, last but not least, how AI and the Metaverse Standards Forum are going to interact. So the first question we normally get asked when people hear about the Metaverse Standards Forum is, what is our definition of the metaverse? If we're going to standardize it, what is it going to be? And the interesting answer is we actually have no idea what the metaverse is going to be in the long term. It's going to be a chaotic Darwinian bottom-up process that brings together many diverse technologies in novel ways, and with so much complexity and innovation. I think a top-down plan on how the metaverse is going to evolve now is not really feasible. I think most people have an idea that it's going to be some connectivity of the web mixed with the immersiveness of spatial computing, plus some Web3, plus definitely AI, of course. But although we don't know the final destination, I think we can have some insight into the process by which the metaverse is going to be formed. And that is a Darwinian mix of technologies and innovations that will eventually surface the successful technologies and products that move the industry forward. With so many technologies being brought together, we do know that we're going to need a lot of interoperability, and that means a lot of interoperability standards. And those standards will help surface the successful technologies and help those technologies to be widely used in an interoperable, cross-platform way, which will remove the barriers to their use in the industry, which creates commercial opportunities, as well as, we think, the opportunity to build an open and equitable metaverse. So what is the superpower of open standards? Why are they so critical to this process? At their core, an interoperability standard enables technology to be used pervasively through the industry. And it does that by enabling multiple implementations. Multiple implementers can create multiple implementations of an open standard to meet different markets, different price points, different use cases. Because an open standard is a specification plus conformance tests, and that enables consistent implementations across multiple parties. Open standards are also very complementary to open source, but open source is very different. Open source is enabling multiple implementers to come together to implement a single implementation. Both are very powerful tools, and open standards often use open source to enable their ecosystems. But if we're trying to fan technology out across the industry pervasively, then open standards can be the right tool for some parts of building the metaverse together. So because we're bringing so many technologies together in the metaverse that haven't had to work together before, we are going to need what we call a constellation of standards. And standards are so pervasive in our lives, we often don't even realize it. We're all using Zoom here now. That means we're using hundreds of hardware and software standards to communicate here today. Indeed, charging your mobile phone or plugging your laptop into a wall outlet, that's another whole ecosystem of standards that is now so pervasive and part of our daily lives, we just take it for granted. And the standards we're going to need to build the metaverse, this constellation of standards, is going to come from dozens and dozens of standards organizations already out there in the industry doing good work. But that multiplicity of standards organizations was the genesis for the Metaverse Standards Forum. We were approached at the Kronos Group by many organizations and companies wanting to use open standards for the metaverse, but really didn't know where to go. They were faced with having to go and talk to each of the standards organizations in turn, dozens of them, trying to figure out who is doing what, where the gaps are, where they needed to engage. And so the industry said and suggested perhaps the standards community could do a better job of organizing to enable effective interaction with the industry. And that was really the basic idea. It's a very simple, straightforward idea behind the Metaverse Standards Forum, to be a venue for cooperation and coordination between the various standards organizations that are making metaverse relevant standards, and to enable effective interaction with the wider industry. And so we have created this forum. It's deliberately a very lightweight, easy to join organization. It's open to all. There's no participation fee. There's no NDA, and there's no IP framework, because the forum is not yet another standards organization. That would just be making the problem worse. The forum is a coordination venue that any organization can join and participate to get a larger understanding of the context of how interoperability standards are being created for building the metaverse. The other key thing that we are very keen on at the forum is to keep things grounded and practical. We don't want to have long debates over what the metaverse is going to be over 20 years, in 20 years' time. I'm not sure that's a very productive discussion, but there are definitely interoperability problems that exist today that we can help solve today, creating commercial opportunities and opportunities to build the metaverse that we all want to see. So the Metaverse Standards Forum will have some products, work products itself. We're creating a register, for example, that will bring together the landscape of all of the interoperability standards that are ongoing, that are relevant to the metaverse, hopefully as an open, accessible resource that will be useful to anyone who's interested in the metaverse. But all of the heavy lifting of creating standards will remain at the standards organizations, but we hope the forum will provide an opportunity for better requirements and use cases, interoperability, data, bugs, and that really just enable the SDOs to produce better metaverse standards sooner. So we launched the forum just a few weeks ago. We're still very young, back in June 2022. These are the 37 founding organizations, and we very much thank them for their faith and their support in the launch of the forum. But now we're in September 2022, and we have over 1,700 members and counting. The number of members continues to grow. This is actually way more interest and support than we were expecting. But I think it speaks to the interest in the industry for standards as a foundation to build the metaverse. And I hope and I believe it speaks to the willingness of many organizations to get involved to help make sure that we have the interoperability standards that we need. But of course, having so many organizations in the forum creates its own unique challenge, which is how do we organize for effective decision-making and action? So we have adopted a 5-step plan where we have first asked the membership for what are the topics they would like to see the forum cover. And we've had over 200 topics already suggested. We've gathered those topics into domains, some of which I've highlighted here. This is the upvote count in the forum. Top of the list was 3D asset interoperability. I'm very happy that second in the list was privacy, safety, security, and inclusion. I think that it's very encouraging that that came up so high in the list, and Kavya from XRSI will be talking more about that later in this session. But digital twins, avatars, apparel, real world integration, IoT, and many other topics. So now the next step, which we're in the middle of right now, this week, is to create domain working groups that will be able to focus on specific projects in each of those domains. And again, 3D asset interoperability, avatars, digital twins. You can see the list here. We're hoping to get these domain working groups up and running in the next few weeks. And then, of course, they will execute the projects and publicly publish any work products that come out of that work. So how does this relate to AI, which is the main topic for today? So many people here know more than I, but AI is going to be very enabling for the metaverse. It's going to be one of the key ingredients that makes the metaverse come to light. Content creation, particularly end user content creation, and particularly in the field of 3D, which has traditionally been a very difficult area for end users to create content. You have photos and videos that are easy to create, but 3D content, not so much. That will be changed by AI and NERFs, neural radiance fields, are going to be another very interesting way to create 3D content, totally enabled by AI. Scene understanding, scanning scenes, geospatial semantic analysis, advanced UI, of course, speech, gestures, even emotions, intuitive, intelligent agents, digital twins, training, smart devices and vehicles, all totally dependent on AI. But of course, again, as people here know probably better than I, AI also brings concerns. Training bias, whether intentional or unintentional. Privacy, storage and monetization of personal data is a particularly acute problem. XR devices, head-mounted virtual reality, scoops up so much personal data. It's going to be much more imperative that we have privacy of data, even in the Web 2 social media. Else all of the problems we're experiencing with Web 2 social media are going to be compounded 100-fold. And NPCs, intelligent agents that are going to know everything about you, and it could be turned into a very manipulative medium. And if we let that happen, the trust in the metaverse will be broken, and no one in the metaverse or using the metaverse wants that to happen. So the Metaverse Standards Forum, again, we're not trying to be a standards organization, and we're not trying to be an advocacy organization either. There are many organizations out there already doing good work. The Metaverse Standards Forum is intended to be an opportunity for those good organizations to gain more visibility, to gain more context and input. And so we want to enable all those good organizations to be more successful through participation in the forum. So we're trying to add value to those existing organizations and assist them, not to compete and conflict with them. And almost out of time, but just one example to talking about very pragmatic projects. And this is in the field of 3D, but the forum is going to be addressing many domains, not just 3D graphics, but this is just one example. There are two asset formats out there right now: USD, which is a Pixar open source project, and GLTF, which is a Kronos open standard. One is built for authoring, one is built for transmission, but they're both beginning to develop attributes that are going to make them overlap and potentially conflict in the future. So this is one example of, we hope the forum can provide a cooperative forum where we can avoid conflict and have a rational-based discussion between the two groups for the benefit of all. And the kind of project we have in mind is to actually try things out, not to debate 20 years down the line, but let's build assets using USD. Let's distill them down into GLTF. Let's make those assets widely available. Let's get all the engine vendors to use them. What works, what doesn't work, where are the gaps, where are the problems? Everyone in this domain is hungry for that kind of data, real world pragmatic data. And we hope the forum can be a good home for that kind of multidisciplinary, multi-organizational project. So that's it. That's my brief summary. So I'll finish saying, if this is of interest and you are an organization where this may be of value to you, please think about getting involved. Any organization is welcome to join, and you'll be very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Neil, for that insightful presentation and for getting us kicked off with your insight into the process of what the future of the metaverse might look like and the important role of standards in an open and equitable metaverse. Thank you so much for that. I'd like to now open the floor to Mr. Ian Fieldies. Ian is a distinguished researcher. He's a doctor in electrical and computer engineering. He's the founder and editor-in-chief of the newly established ITU Journal on Future and Evolving Technologies. Currently, he's the president of Truva Inc., based in Atlanta, Georgia. He also serves on the advisory board for the newly established Research Center Technology and Innovation Institute, TII, in Abu Dhabi. And his research interests include 6G, SG wireless communication systems, terahertz communication, Internet of Bio-Nano Things, molecular communication, reconfigurable intelligent surfaces, nano networks, among others. Welcome, Ian, to AI for Good.
Thanks a lot, Jennifer. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night all around the world. I'm very pleased to be part of this distinguished panel webinar. And my talk will be from the communications perspective regarding the metaverse. So Neil tried to give a very complex definition of the metaverse, and let me simplify it and then see what I think about metaverse. Meta stands for beyond from Greek, and verse is from universe, which is originated from the science fiction novel Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson almost 30 years ago. And the metaverse is a network of connecting physical and virtual worlds seamlessly, as we see here. On the left-hand side, the physical world, like the eye and eyes, And then we have all these kind of like the truly immersive experiences for a plethora of use cases using like holographic type communication, extended reality, which is the umbrella terminology for virtual and mixed reality and augmented reality, and bunch of legacy gateways for communication networks. And then we create a world of which is called Metaverse, where there is no separation between virtual and physical world. And this is thanks to the convergence of key emerging technologies such as extended reality and holographic type communication. And so in my opinion, the Metaverse is sitting again, I'm really trying to simplify the entire Metaverse world. So there are so-called M worlds, like Metaverse worlds, work productivity, interactive gaming and learning, e-commerce, real estate, fashion, shopping, tourism, name them. I mean, by no means this list is complete. And then another pillar is the Web 3.0, which is based on these futures like decentralized and autonomous, heavily based on AI and machine learning technologies, as well as blockchain, cryptocurrency-enabled, intelligent adaptive applications, and semantic technologies. And another pillar is, as I mentioned before, extended reality as well as holographic type communication. And the Metaverse worlds, there are many platforms. I have some of them here. There are really hundreds of them in the meantime, capturing all bases in our lives, from the gaming, from real estate, fashion, name them. And they're really very lucrative companies. And hopefully some of the young people will look into this and create more metaverse. And the market is huge. Like it is expected by 2025, like almost $500 billion, maybe more. I'm not an economist, but there's a huge market in the metaverse world. And of course, we're talking about, again, from the hardware and software perspectives. And I will mention some of the lack of the hardware as well as for the communication aspects, plus, of course, all the software needed for the metaverse to be realized. And you see here a kind of like vision. Again, by no means is a complete like set of applications like telepresence, healthcare, education, automotive industry, entertainment, and industrial automation. And underneath this, you see a bunch of like hundreds of different applications. And the services, again, they are building on top of this metaverse world. Again, extended reality as well as holographic type communications. And the technologies that we will be needing for this are like maybe 5G, but 6G and beyond wireless systems, new backbone network like internet, kind of like new internet, you can say that, high precision networking, federated networks, edge intelligence. I will mention why we need edge computing, edge intelligence, and semantic technologies. And of course, all these technologies are sitting on top of security, privacy, and trust. All my other colleagues in this panel will talk about heavily on the security and privacy issues, and AI and machine learning. So, so I'm focusing on the communication aspects in terms of extended reality and also holographic time communication. If you're interested, we have these two very detailed papers which we publish in the ITU Journal for Future and Evolving Technologies Journal in April and August this year. We tried again to cover all the bases from the communications perspectives. So there are many details in these papers. So what is extended reality is, as we all know, that human perception of real objects is based on 5 basic senses like sight, hearing, touch, smell, and taste. And the virtual reality, this is from the paper back in, again, almost 30 years ago, 1994. That's the reality virtuality continuum. On the right-hand side, we have the virtual reality here, which is all the virtual objects are digitally created to represent the same real senses and environments. And on the other side of the spectrum is the real environment. In between, we have the augmented and reality and augmented virtuality, meaning that if you have low percentage of virtual contents, we're in the domain of the augmented reality. If you have high percentage of the virtual contents, we're in the augmented virtuality. And of course, if you have 100% virtual contents, we're in the virtual reality domain. And as I told you, that the entire umbrella terminology is called extended reality. And all these new technologies like AI, machine learning, IoT, I will not use 5G, like 6G and beyond, will make these realities possible. And there are a plethora of use cases like the pattern language. You see here, maybe I should not go through all of them, but like we can use them in entertainment, sport, healthcare, tourism, education, and e-commerce, in automotive industry, health industry, and like the tourism, real estate, gaming. So they're all here. So there's a really very long list of applications that we may use these technologies. And the other case is so-called holographic type communication. That is, a hologram is a photographic recording of a light field, which consists of 3D virtual images that reflect real physical objects, preserving the depth, parallax, and other properties of the original item. Here we see like orange and apple, and then we have a bunch of cameras, and then we see these fruits like as if they are real in front of us. So holography is a photographic technique that records the light scattered from an object and then present it in a way that appears in 3D. Again, this technology is existing since many years, but it's really still primitive. Like for example, in Las Vegas, there's this Whitney Houston concert, or really it's a show in Caesar's Palace, as I can recall. I was there in May. I didn't go to the show, but also like ABBA gave a holographic concert back at the end of May in London. That was a huge success. But still, it's under progress, really. And as you see here, we can have these soccer game as if it's in front of us, or some boxing game, and also some meetings. So it's a fantastic technology, and I hope this will be realized within the next 10 years, in a more sophisticated way. And I also mentioned to you about these 5 senses, and holographic type communication will cover sight, hearing, touch, smell, and taste. And extended reality, all of the above without the smell and taste cases. And then the other ones are, known, like audio, video, etc. And so you see also this backbone I'm talking about from the communications perspective, as you know. So wireless and wired networks will be used to realize these communications for the extended reality as well as holographic type communications, including these 5 senses, right? It will be an interesting challenge, as you can imagine. So you see there are a bunch of these on the right-hand side, wireless technologies in all areas: maritime, indoor, outdoors, terrestrial, air, and space, backbone like internet, and then many applications. I just showed a couple of them here. And of course, the basic architecture in an abstract way, we have a project called Holo for All to make it cheap, affordable communication architecture for holographic and also extended reality. They're all based on AI and machine learning, all this software, and also hopefully the hardware that will be developed over the time. So due to the time constraint, I would like to talk about what are the challenges, again, in a nutshell, from communications, networking, and computing perspectives. So first of all, we have extremely high data rates. That means we need terabit per second communications, and today's networks, wired or wireless, they cannot satisfy the quality of service, quality of expectations of these applications. Moreover, they have very strict low latency requirements, and 6G and beyond, as well as the internet, need to be upgraded. And also we have, based on the use cases, we have these semantic notions. So far, we have always like syntactically checking the digital bits, what are zeros, kind of like error control. And then we decided, is there error or not? But now we are talking about from the semantic perspective. Is it sent what we received in terms of semantic meaning? So that's a huge research area that people are looking at currently in the communications domain. And also high precision communication networks, meaning how will we take care of the strict latency requirements, like in terms of like congestion control in the networks and packet drops, and also predicting the network load, wired or wireless. And also federated networks and also AI and machine learning empowered networks are challenges and very exciting problems in that domain. And then when we look at the server and user devices hardware perspective, like how will we realize this multimedia transmission, right? And also synchronization between these different senses. How will we predict the user motions and also the video capture, synchronization, display, and how can we reduce the very, very large number of cameras if we use holograms? And so this is, again, by no means complete, by the way. So in the paper, we discussed all of them in detail. And then also edge computing is a very hot topic in communications, especially when we have these latency requirements. When we go end to end, good luck, right? Because the delay, the latency will increase incredibly. That's why people are trying to do some edge computing, edge intelligence in order to reduce the latency plus all the complexity of this data processing algorithms, data compression, decompression, etc. And so there are, I mentioned to you, the current technologies cannot satisfy the requirements. You see here the data rates in mixed reality and augmented reality, 35 megabit per second to 15 gigabit per second. But when we go to holographic type communication, we jump to 1 to 10 terabit per second. Latencies like 10 milliseconds, but will go down to less than 1 millisecond. Synchronization, like thousands of these views and senses, and devices like, can we do naked eyes and also head-mounted devices? But also there are many problems how we can design these head-mounted devices the most sophisticated way. And the future looks like this, ultimate mixed reality, virtual reality, and holographic type. So we're talking about 1 millisecond, and the data rates are like many terabit per seconds. And stage 1, we are currently around here, like this, around 10 millisecond. We are happy if we can get these latencies. So the last slide is about the software developments like protocols. like all AI and machine learning empowered solutions, like the transport layers, these are existing, but they are by no means they're enough. We need new transport layer solutions, as well as the network layer, new IP design maybe, and in physical data link layer, there are tons of problems. Again, I ask you to look at our papers, and you can see more details about the challenges and all these other technologies, as well as power consumption, weight reduction of these head-mounted devices, for example, the mobility effects, and also collaboration and metaverse. So I thank you for listening. I hope I'm on time. So
you're perfectly on time. Thank you,
okay,
Ian.
great. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian, for that look into the many dimensions of the metaverse and the technologies that we need to enable it with, AI and others. I think HTC is very exciting. I'm sure we'll have some questions about these technologies later on in our session. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mr. Andrew Plato. Andrew is a CEO, founder, entrepreneur, and cybersecurity expert. In 1995, he founded one of the first companies dedicated to information security, Initian, leading the company as a pioneer in network security, risk management, and compliance practices. This culminated in 2016 with the invention of an automated platform that dramatically accelerated the deployment and configuration of security in cloud environments. During this time, Andrew has also cultivated lucrative strategic partnerships with leading security and cloud companies such as AWS, Microsoft Azure, Trend Micro, and others. And Andrew is currently the CEO and founder of zasilane, which provides security and cloud advisory services to investors and leaders worldwide. Andrew is a prolific speaker, author, and industry analyst on matters of cybersecurity, compliance, and leadership. And we're so happy to have you here, Andrew. Welcome to AI for Good.
Well, welcome. Thank you. Thank you very much for that nice introduction, and welcome all from Portland, Oregon. So as you heard, I'm Andrew Plato, CEO of zasilane, and I'm going to be talking today about security. So let me share my screen first. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to be talking about security in the metaverse today, and I want to start by talking about threats to the metaverse. So you've heard a lot about today about what the metaverse is and all the different capabilities and all the different features and what have you. But the metaverse is, like any other technology, hackable, very hackable. And there are attackers and there are forces out there who want to disrupt, who want to steal, who want to do all the things that are happening right now on the internet are happening in the metaverse. So I want to start by talking about the threats, because in information security, we always begin with what's the bad things that can happen. That's what a threat is. It's discussion of all the different things that can happen, the bad things that can happen in the metaverse. Now, this is a list of some of the threats that the metaverse faces, not all of them. And I'm not necessarily going to go through each one of them, but I want to talk about a couple and how they impact the metaverse. And I'll start at the top of this list, which amplified IT threats. All of the threats that affect internet systems, that affect your computer, that affect servers and applications are amplified in the metaverse. And this has to do with how the metaverse is architected. The metaverse is this complex interrelationship between many different microservices and APIs and containers and all these different things, all talking back and forth to each other. You have a really complex system like that, there's a much higher degree of dependency on each one of those different components. That means that all of the current vulnerabilities and threats that are out there today that affect your computer system are amplified in the metaverse because of that complexity. An attack on one site could potentially propagate to all or many different sites. And we've seen similar attacks of that when you look at how, like, cloud service providers and other big sort of complex networks are broken into. The hackers can move laterally through those networks relatively quickly. The next threat I want to spend a moment talking about is library vulnerabilities. Now, this is a kind of a term that, unless you're in information security, you probably don't hear it a lot, but library vulnerabilities have to do with the underlying tools that are in use in these sites and these platforms. So, for example, there's many different metaverse platforms or tools that you can use. For example, there's a tool out there called the Ethereal Engine, which is based on a bunch of open source tools that are brought together to build these virtual environments. And there's a pretty good there's a demo on the web. You can go play around. You walk around this apartment. It's kind of cool. And the Ethereal Engine is just one. There's, of course, Unreal. There's Unity. There's all these different engines. Well, these engines and platforms are made up of many different other components. Library vulnerabilities talk about vulnerabilities to one of those dependent components. When you have a library vulnerability, when you have an attack on one of those things, it has the potential to, again, be very widespread. We've already seen examples of this on the internet. So Log4j, for example, that came out a few years ago, or Heartbleed, that was back in 2014. Those are examples of library vulnerabilities to core operating components that then ended up impacting millions of different websites. Heartbleed, for example, affected every cloud service provider out there. Same problem could affect the metaverse. You have one of these XR engines gets compromised in some way. You could have a bunch of sites simultaneously be compromised. But then the other big problem, the other big threat to the metaverse is this last item on the list. Now, normally those of us in information security, we don't get into kind of personal security and safety. That's that's more like physical security. We tend to we want to focus on the computer and data security world. But in the metaverse, you're bringing together sort of your the real world, and you're virtualizing it, which means you now suddenly computer security issues or data security issues become personal safety issues. And this is where you start to see this emergence of hate, harassment, bullying, and other sorts of abhorrent behavior in the metaverse. And because you're talking about a virtualized world, personal safety and information security become sort of intertwined. And I'm going to talk about the importance of this and why, as an information security professional, hate, harassment, bullying, and these kind of personal safety issues are beyond just being that. They are an actual information security challenge that we need to deal with. Okay, so those are some of the threats. And as you see, there's other ones here, but I want to talk about some of the sort of opportunities or the challenges, the security challenges that the metaverse faces, and then what are some of the ways that those are being dealt with. So you could break up security into kind of two big categories. This just helps us sort of organize our thinking and talking about them. You have technical security controls, things like firewalls and antivirus and different kinds of technical access controls you can put around devices. And then you have governance controls, things like compliance and policies and procedures. So the metaverse has the same sort of breakdown. Let's talk first about some of the technical security challenges that the metaverse faces. And I picked out three that I think are very representative of where the metaverse is. And in some cases, these are very similar to the challenges that your traditional applications and other internet or Web 2 sites would face. The first one is API security. So you heard me say at the beginning of this, it's one of the challenges of the metaverse is because of how it's engineered, right? You have all these different APIs talking to each other. An API, by the way, is an application programming interface. These are these interfaces that all these different sites use to interact and share data with each other. So when you log onto one site, you connect to one API, and that may connect to dozens, if not hundreds of other APIs for other services to provide you things like spatial mapping or location or identity or what have you. APIs is really the core sort of infrastructure of the metaverse. The good news about APIs is there's already a fair amount of security controls to secure APIs. One of the things we want to avoid is hackers can inject malicious code into those API communications. So for example, have you ever seen those big long URLs that get submitted through on websites? Well, that's an API submission. And what you can do is you can embed things into those. You can embed like binary code into that, which if the interpreter on the other side doesn't know what to do, it can interpret that and potentially run malicious code. This is often called an injection style attack. The good thing is, like I said, there's a lot of controls out there. So one control, for example, is an API gateway, where you gateway all of your API calls through what's similar to like a firewall. It takes all the commands and it can provide filtering. So for example, if an attacker tries to submit malicious code through an API call, it can actually filter that out, and it can even block the offender saying, you're not allowed to access this anymore. API gateways is a good practice. It's something that anybody who's deploying an API, whether it be for a metaverse or something else, you should do. And it's a good example of a standards that can be adopted by metaverse sites. If standards organizations, which is what we're talking about here, right, with the AI for Good and the UN, standards like that, technical standards where you line item some of these things like this is a good practice to implement, can help increase the security of all those metaverse sites. When everybody uses API gateways, when they use things like encryption for their APIs, this has the benefit of raising security of all of the metaverse sites at the same time. Next one I want to talk about though is identity protection. So when you're a hacker and you want to break into an environment, and my company, we did pen testing for many, many years, which is basically you get to be a hacker, but people pay you for it. And it's really fun. Like pen testing is like one of the most fun parts of information security because you get to basically hack into networks. So when you're hacking into an environment, and this is true of not only the legitimate, white hat hackers like I was, but also of course the bad guys, you want to steal credentials. Credentials are the holy grail. That's what the hackers want, because once you have credentials, once you have somebody's identity or their access rights, you can then do what's called moving laterally through the environment. You can essentially use their credentials to move throughout the environment. Pretty much all the big data breaches you've heard of, they started with some sort of credential theft. So identity, that logon, that user, that password, your avatar in the metaverse, this is really crucial to protect. And it's the thing that hackers are going to steal. We've already seen cases of avatar hijacking where hackers will steal an avatar and they can actually look like you. They can adopt your skin and adopt everything that is in your account. Again, the good news is that there's already ways to combat this. And one of the simplest ways to combat this is to use centralized identity stores. So to rely on these big centralized stores. So you already have large corporations like Microsoft and Meta and Google, which provide identity. They provide logons and passwords. That's actually a good thing, because when you use one of these third-party identity repositories, your identity information is no longer shared between all these sites. They do what's called tokenization. They actually tokenize your identity information, and that token is what's shared around. So when you go from one metaverse to another metaverse to another metaverse, you're not sharing that identity data all the time. You're just sharing that token. And when you log off, that token just disappears. It's gone. It's useless. That's great, because from a hacking perspective, if I'm a hacker and I steal that token, I can't really do anything with it. It's useless. So that centralization of identity is really valuable. It allows for not only the tokenization of identity information, but it also allows for, if there is an identity problem, that singular provider can just wipe out that or reset the password or do whatever is necessary to get that identity back. So that's another good example of where the metaverse needs to adopt those kind of standards, which many websites are already doing. When you go to a site, you already see you can sign up with a Facebook or a Google account. That's exactly what we're talking about, use of these sort of centralized identity stores. The last big technical one is crypto security. So Metaverse is all about sort of blockchain and cryptocurrencies and NFTs and all these emerging crypto tech. Blockchain is awesome, and it has some really great security benefits. The fact that, this is all shared throughout the entire network. It also has some really bad security problems with it. The fact is that if you can inject fraudulent transactions into a blockchain, which hackers have already done, they're there and they're really difficult to get rid of because of the nature of how blockchain works. So there's a tremendous opportunity for abuse in blockchain. And we've already seen that. We've already seen that with a lot of cryptocurrencies. I read a statistic just recently that something like 60% of all cryptocurrency transactions are fraudulent, which is, I don't know how true that was, but it was pretty terrifying to think of that. This is a good example where, again, where standardization really can be, and standards can really be beneficial. So standards for crypto storage, standards for crypto communication and encryption, and validation. These are all the kinds of things that these various metaverse groups, this is exactly what we need, because with that, we can then start enforcing those standards and then start to root out some of that fraud. Also, the use of more hybrid blockchain environments where you have a central authority that can validate a transaction. And as you'll see, I mentioned, this is also an opportunity for AI to detect these fraudulent transactions. Okay. So I want to move along. I want to talk about some of the governance challenges that the metaverse has from a security perspective. And the big one, everybody talks about privacy challenges, and blockchain inherently kind of shares information everywhere. Metaverses can contain a lot of personal data, so people tend to, they just share. I mean, let's face it, social media is kind of the same way. Metaverse is an extension of that, not a direct extension of that. If you spend any time on Fortnite or any of these games, I mean, people share all sorts of information about themselves because this is the world we live in these days. This is where we communicate. This is where we interact with people. So we have a lot of data flying around all over the place, and we need to protect that data. We need to empower people to be able to make decisions about that privacy data. Again, good thing is we already have some great privacy frameworks like GDPR. We just need to extend that into Metaverse and the data and give and empower users the ability to protect their private data and be able to request it and delete it and all those other good things. But we also need to adopt laws to extend that around the protection of minors. That really gets to my next two slides, and where, as an information security professional, I really see the big problem of the metaverse, and a problem that's still a ways out into the future, but it's the one that frankly scares me and a lot of other security people, which is behavioral data. So one of the areas where the metaverse is fundamentally different than websites or social media is the amount and the type of data that it stores. So you go to a regular old, social media website, right? And you click on pictures of kittens, right? And everybody loves kittens. I like kittens. Anyways, you click on pictures of kittens. That social media site, Facebook, whatever, they know you like kittens. So they can say, okay, Andrew, he's 53 years old, he's kind of weird, and he likes kittens and Star Trek. Okay, it knows a little bit about me and it can infer something. So next time I log on, it's going to give me an ad about cat food or something like that, right? Okay, that's the kind of data that social media takes. And that isn't really me. That's something about me. That's an attribute about me. I happen to like cats, right? In the metaverse, you go to really the next level. You're not just capturing, the picture of me and the fact that I like cats. You're actually capturing my behavior. You're capturing how I interact with people, what I look at, what I dwell on, what makes me want to do things, what doesn't make me want to do things. You can capture actually how I behave as a human being. And behavior is you. If there's anything that is the most ultimate essence of you in this world, it's how you behave. It's how you interact with people. I mean, that defines you as a person. And
sorry, Andrew, we're going to have to wrap up.
If you have all this behavioral data, you can weaponize that data, and you can use it to contrive all sorts of things and be able to attack people using that information. And that is where I think a lot of us in the information security world are very concerned about the use of behavioral data and weaponizing it, and the fact that you can take that data and then attack people with it, or harass people or bully people or what have you. And that kind of gets to the second one I had here, which had to do with content controls and the extension of video game style content controls. I understand I'm running out of time, so I'm going to wrap up real quick and say I think there's a lot of opportunities for AI on these areas. AI is difficult to implement from a security perspective, mainly because of the positive negative problem. But one of the areas that it can help is detecting these abhorrent behaviors, things we want to try to avoid, and detect this kind of deep fakes and other ways that behavioral data can be weaponized against people to be able to figure out things about them and be able to manipulate them into doing particular things. So since I'm out of time and I ran a little long, I'll just say thank you very much for listening to me today. I really appreciate it. Sorry I went a little over,
No
Jennifer.
problem.
So I'll turn the floor back over.
Thank you, Andrew. That's actually, that last point is a topic that's very close to my heart. So I actually will have some follow-up questions that will probably round it all out. Thank you so much for helping us better understand some of the security and data integrity challenges that we're going to be facing in the future. And actually, some of those are very daunting. It's comforting to know that there are people like you out there who are already kind of taking care of it. So thanks a lot. Now I'd like to welcome our next speaker, Ms. Kavya Perlman. She is popularly known as the Cyber Guardian. Kavya is an award-winning cybersecurity professional with a deep interest in immersive and emerging technologies. She's the founder of the nonprofit XR Safety Initiative, XRSI, the very first global effort that promotes privacy, security, ethics, and develops standards and guidelines for VR, AR, and mixed reality, collectively known as XR. She has been named one of the top cybersecurity influencers for 2 consecutive years by IFSEC Global. Kavi's won many awards for her work and contribution to the security community, including the Middle East CISO Council's CISO 100 Women Security Leader Award in Dubai. She's also advised Facebook on third-party security risk during the 2016 US presidential elections. Welcome, Kavi, to AI for Good. It's great to have you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. And now I know why oftentimes I disagree with my cybersecurity, information security colleagues, because I'm going to make some points that I completely disagree with Andrew. And at the end of my session, I hope you guys should know why. But let me start by sharing my screen real quick. Hope you can see the full screen. Great. So I'm going to be talking about why we all have to sort of break away from the traditional thinking and really think about the metaverse in terms of safeguarding, and not just let's do cybersecurity or information security. It's all very important. And then there are all these intersections. So without wasting much of a time, I'm going to get into some of the moral reasons of these things and why what we do at XRSI, why we do that. So we know that Web 1 was created by idealists and unleashed unprecedented potential. Web 2, however, was created by capitalists and realized Web 1's potential, but it excluded marginalized communities and several groups and centralized power structures and exacerbated the societal harm. For someone like me who had the first front row seat to Cambridge Analytica scandal, then at Facebook in 2016, I should know. And Web 3, this is an opportunity for us to become the creator of our own tech ecosystems, our own realities. And why am I saying that? Why? Because I believe we can avoid the missteps of the past. A preemptive action is needed to establish privacy, security, safeguarding. We need standards, guidance, global, legal safety frameworks, and protection of human rights to provide for these new immersive realities. Because without them, we're bound to repeat those mistakes. And that's why XRSI exists, to ensure that this next generation of the internet is open, it's equitable, and it's free from harm. Let's start by why and how and where we are getting all this understanding. So we conducted a research with MITRE Corporation, a federal agency that assigns CVE numbers. Some of you may have heard of it. And this is our baseline understanding. This is what XRSI does. Back when 2019 we started, there was a lot of debate about what is VR, XR, AR. So we just issued a standard to say, hey, this is what XR is. 3 years later, we stopped fighting the word of war, and now we're fighting about the metaverse. But we have to start somewhere. And this comes from my background back at Linden Lab, if you may have heard of. I was the head of security for Linden Lab, makers of Second Life, one of the oldest existing virtual wars. That's where I started to think about, hey, how can we safeguard humans within these ecosystems, these virtual wars? There's something fundamentally different about it. And they were also creating their virtual reality platform, Sansar. So that's when I realized we need to dissect the risk. When people just create in an environment, the risk is limited to that creation. Maybe somebody can inject a malicious code in the chair that you may be sitting in inside a virtual floor. But when you bring 2 people together, and that's why you start to see this whole segmentation is really for us, XRSI and others, to understand the risks and then dissect those and then address them. So Metaverse, which is a convergence of all of these different technologies, this is how we are trying to address and safeguard the Metaverse. We need to specifically target infrastructure-related risks, which includes artificial intelligence, creating potentially that infrastructure, cloud computing, quantum computing, blockchain, etc. So anyhow, when you connect to people, the risks are different. People behave differently, as Andrew was pointing out. There are many new questions. We have not, as humans, interacted thus far with AI and embodied AI that looks exactly like human. And we haven't even figured out the rules of engagement there. Do I know that's a human? Do I know that's an AI? Or what happens there? So those rules need to be established. What do we do? Brain-computer interfaces. When you connect people using BCI, brain-computer interfaces, newer technologies, different type of risks emerge. We have to set the rules of engagement. And then comes commerce. So, when you bring in money into the play, which is exactly what I observed at Linden too, there's different risks. And if you hear a screaming parrot, Mr. Data, in the background, because he's a little upset he has to wake up early morning. Sorry about that. So anyhow, data. Data is at the core of data is what creates the metaverse experiences. Data impacts societies, shapes futures. On the left, you will see 2011, when you can use cyber means to bring down a dictator of 30 years old dictator. That's power. Russians were taking notes. Came back around in 2016, and we saw in 2012, we saw that Obama campaign itself, kind of benefited from those data campaigns. And then we saw that at Brexit, we saw that 2016. In fact, I would go as far as saying that the day of insurrection in the United States was driven by some of these data challenges that are still unsolved. The misinformation, the disinformation, the data mining that leads to influencing democracies. Cambridge Analytica, interestingly, only used 5,000 data points per user. Now, here's the difference for our new and emerging realities. In virtual reality, this is a figure from Stanford University conducted research around 2018-19. Within just 20 minutes, you can record over 2 million unique body recordings, which is so much more data than we have dealt with. And that's not all. It is the kind of data that is important too. We call it XR data, can be defined as data collected, inferred, processed, shared from both consumers and bystanders to create and facilitate immersive experiences. So this XR data specifically, and I would say a picture is worth 1,000 words. So let's look at just the eye gaze tracking data. We actually established, GDPR essentially says sensitive data, and there's a lot of this ambiguity around, what kind of data should we be protecting? Well, we gotta be protecting biometrically inferred data, psychographically inferred data, because that leads to human harms. And I will talk about how that would happen. But you can see just with the eye gaze, pupil dilation, these devices that we would use, and I currently use this device for work as well. Meta's Quest device, I try to not use too much because I don't want to be that data paddle, where all of my data is limited to this centralized entity and they know exactly what's, how I feel, everything. So this data is something that we need to really care about. And here are more reasons to care about this data, because that attributes to representation. And there is a correlation between data and human rights and how they can potentially be undermined. So far, we've thought of representation in real life, which potentially leads to disparity in data sets, which potentially leads to AI biases. But when it comes to the metaverse, the representation also includes your virtual avatar representation. I have demanded a hijabi avatar from so many platforms, and I had to always ask. They never thought that it is useful to create a representation of someone like me. They rather, prioritize a cowboy hat. Now, cowboy hat is still worn by less people, but the decisions were being made by some white dude bros that are mostly driving these things. And that's why putting the people into the ecosystem who are making the decisions, as well as the representation online, it really matters now. And that also leads to synthetic data that we're going to use to derive some of these tools. Then comes the ownership. So earlier, Andrew was saying, oh, it's a good thing that we should give our identity to centralized, Meta and Microsoft. I say, hell no, we have to reclaim. This is the only chance we have for reclaiming ownership of our data, of our identity. So centralized ecosystems would very much love to own all of that, to dictate our lives, to tell us how we vote, to tell us everything. I say no to that. This is our chance, and if we are not careful, that's exactly the direction people would move to, and we would be stuck to those walled gardens and will be dictated by those people how we should behave and what we should say and not say. And that's, especially when you take a broad spectrum of the entire cultures of the world, that cannot be allowed to be dictated by a few people sitting in the valley. I sit in the valley too, and that's why I can speak from firsthand experience. This is dangerous to propagate that rhetoric. Protection, we are going to need legal protection of people. Already, some of the artificial intelligence tools by Meta has, previously labeled African-American male as primates. Like, these are kind of things that we're going to see emerge, lots of biases that could potentially even lead to genocide. And I'm, damn serious about that. So I would recommend this particular reading. It's on XRSI website. We conducted a roundtable around the, type of data, what kind of virtual world real risk challenges that we are going to face. And we continue this research. So I would highly, highly recommend. I'm going to switch gear a little bit, how much more difficult and complex it is going to get when it comes to the metaverse. Let's talk about cyber attacks. So previously, Andrew covered a little bit about hey, traditional threats, and magically it seemed that every threat has a solution. I would say no. Not at all. In fact, this is where Metaverse Standard Forum and all of these players, and including XRSI, we're gearing up, we're coming together, because the threats are not just traditional, they're just novel threats that we don't even know of. So what I'm displaying here is the attack surface. The attack surface traditionally has been the nodes, the network, the server, and now the attack surface is expanded to our minds, to our living spaces, to our living room, to our neighborhood, where somebody could be installing some kind of augmented reality artwork just to defame you. So these are novel threats that we need to, acknowledge, and then of course, then respond to it. There are novel cyber attacks that were discovered by one of our co-founder, one of our senior advisor, Ibrahim Bejili. His team at University of New Haven discovered these novel cyber attacks where you could potentially move a subject, track a subject exactly where they're looking, and they kind of attributed these 4 different names. And there were other cyber attacks that they uncovered as well in virtual reality environment. So hijacking the front-facing camera of of a particular virtual reality device, looking inside the person's room. I mean, anything that around you, you could have your prescription, etc. So this leads to privacy consideration. They executed a chaperone attack, they called it, and human joystick attack. Chaperone attack is where they disable your safety boundaries and you could literally run into a wall. And that is very interesting. When we talk about human joystick attack, you'll see the green dot is where the person is supposed to be. When they manipulate the configuration, the person ends up there. When they take out the headset, they're like, oh, how did I get here? So these are very interesting things, especially if you're a person of interest. And if everybody knows where your pinky finger is, because you have given this information to the Zucks and the other Microsoft and Meta centralized corporations that now control your data, this gets very interesting real fast. And there is this overlay attack where you can potentially, overlay on top of your environment. Somebody can hijack your view of your, of your headset. I want to play a quick clip from the intersection of AI. That makes it even more interesting from the attack surface point of view. So,
hey, Builderbot. First, let's start with the scene. Let's go to a park. Actually, let's go to the beach. Pretty good. Let's add some clouds.
So I think we've seen enough here to know that there is already, Meta announced this on day before the war broke out. They did the AI event and they announced this, unleash this capability, announced the Kairoki, which, is another project with the self-learning AI neural model that basically captures input way beyond just speech. It includes movement, position, body language to build smarter worlds, smarter virtual assistants, and anticipate anything that you want. So that's great. And even Google has this project called LOL Nerf, where they've developed this technique where they use just a single image to create three-dimensional structure from a 2D single image. Where is all this leading to? In fact, if you look at OpenAI's roadmap, it really tells me that we are not too far from text to XR. In fact, that's what, I'm going to play this. So I think we've seen enough. So text to video is already here. We've already seen AI artwork being generated beautifully by several people, just common people. Now, how long before text to XR? But here's the caveat here. Just last week, somebody prompted the GPT-3 AI engine, and they call it the prompt injection. Wilson Simon actually wrote about that, and a blog that is referred here. Prompt injection supersedes, has the ability, you can supersede the instruction to an AI. And there is so far no solution to this. And why that is important to acknowledge is for SQL injection. It's very much like SQL injection. It's tricking the AI engine to execute something that, supersedes what it's intended to do. SQL injection, you can address. It's you can provide escape quotes, all these mitigation tactic. If you correctly escape, if you do quotes for the user providing string, you're okay with that. But this prompt injection is still possible. So at least we need to tell humans that seeing is no longer believing, and your potentially AI created virtual world is open to manipulation. And that's something that we need to collectively acknowledge and tell. And why we want to get ahead of this problem, because it's by nature, these immersive technologies present this double bind problem. This is the first is the information problem, where you can't really easily predict what would be the technology's outcome until it's widely used and spread, tons of data is collected, surveillance happens. But the second problem is the power problem, is the control, the changing that is really difficult. Even with the most explainable AI, you can't undo some of these bias effects that go into the society. And that's why we got to get ahead of these challenges from the research that I mentioned, the metaverse, the baseline, and autonomy. These are things that we've established. These are incredibly important things to address. When I talk about don't just do security, don't just do privacy, we need to think about safeguarding our next iteration of the internet, where identity protection is going to be key. And if we hand over identity and not demand for self-sovereign identity, that is going to be a major issue. So as humans create, connect, do commerce, these are things that we really need to pay attention to, starting with fundamental things, understanding the base principles, creating some baseline, understanding what is the impact. And so what are the solutions? We're working on it. We launched XRSI privacy framework for the safety framework in 2020. And let me tell you, GDPR is not the solution at all. GDPR does not even acknowledge biometrically inferred data. GDPR does not encompass any of these immersive technologies just yet. So we work on several different, encompassing several solutions. XRSI privacy safety framework is now in version 2. We're working on medical XR framework and child safety specific framework. Essentially, by taking this wider route, we're really defining the North Star for what good looks like in the metaverse, for what kind of a world do we really want to believe and live in and create. We want digital rights, health and wellness. And here I'm including some of these contents, the people, the entities that we are working with. We've already gotten started. In fact, Metaverse Standard Forum, I am aspiring to lead some of these conversations at Metaverse Standard Forum, where we bring all these people together to then talk about all these issues that I discussed. I want to give a shout out to our MKAI artificial intelligence community. They have actually provided tons of research, first community, to pursue the intersection of AI and the metaverse. And I'm going to end with this. We are already starting this intervention, and this is like the third year we're celebrating Metaverse Safety Week, where I want to call upon everyone to join together, to come together. There's going to be policymakers, Congress people, global leaders, United Nations leaders, and Neil, and everybody, all my information security friends, and everyone is welcome during this right before the holidays. Every year after year, we are asking governments to issue guidance to their citizens. What's coming? What's happening? So we will influence our stakeholders. I want all of you to come together with me, join hands, and participate in Metaverse Safety Week to not just learn about, but also to respond to and understand what kind of a safeguarding is necessary to build a better iteration of the internet. So thank you so much. Hope, Jennifer, I'm on time.
You're right on time, Kavya. Thank you so much. That was a really inspirational way to close. Thank you for sharing the event information, and I'm sure lots of people that are on this webinar will want to attend. You've given us a lot to talk about and think about in your presentation. It sounds like there's lots of unknowns still, but a lot of hope for the future in terms of online safety in the metaverse with so many smart people thinking about these things. So happy to have you here. Thanks once again. So now we'd like to welcome Mr. Misha Dohler. Misha was professor in wireless communications at King's College London, driving cross-disciplinary research and innovation in technology, sciences, and arts. He is a fellow of the IEEE, the Royal Academy of Engineering, the Royal Society of Arts, the Institution of Engineering and Technology, the IET, and a distinguished member of Harvard Square Leaders Excellence. He's a serial entrepreneur with 5 companies, composer, pianist with 5 albums on Spotify and iTunes. How cool. Fluent in several languages. He sits on the Spectrum Advisory Board of Ofcom, has pioneered several research fields, contributed to numerous wireless broadband, IoT, M2M, and cyber security standards, holds a dozen patents, and is a top 1% cited scientist across all fields globally. Welcome, Misha Dohler, to AI for Good. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jennifer. And greetings from Silicon Valley. The sun is just coming up behind my back in California. And, I thought I'll give you a Silicon Valley view. And unfortunately, I couldn't listen to all presentations. I had another keynote before, but just the end of the presentation before was really fascinating and resonates a lot with what I have to say. Now, I thought I'd structure this today around an opportunity. I think we do have a real opportunity when it comes to the metaverse, and a few challenges, you heard about a few challenges, but also I'd like to talk about, the black sheep in the room, the threat, which we need to really get a grip on. So let's get going. I have a few slides. I don't have too many, but let me start with with Neil. Actually, Neil Stephenson. He's the one who coined the term the metaverse in his 1992 science fiction novel Snow Crash. Right. So, and I met him in Stanford the other day, and he coined that term 30 years ago. So I did ask him, Neil, are you working on something new? Are you writing about something which predicts our future 30 years from now? He did answer me, but unfortunately, I can't tell you. So we will need to wait and maybe have another ITU gathering in about 30 years from now. So, but let's get serious. What is it really to us? And I thought I'll put up this slide and really just to identify how do we see that now. And when I say we say, I'm primarily in the likes of the vendors and the telco ecosystem. So the first and foremost thing is really it's a social element. We really don't want this to be, just another device or application or another screen where you see more advertisement, where more, privacy is being invaded. We don't see this to be something where you put on a VR headset and you are, you're playing a game alone or you're working alone. It's really social. If we believe in this to be the next internet and really the next 3-dimensional internet, which helps us to augment our real world, we need to make sure that this becomes social. This becomes something we feel very safe to be in, for our children to be in there, for us to spend time together. Okay, and just putting this on number one really, and not putting technology above that, really shows that we need to get all around privacy rights. The ethics we talked about. You heard about this in the previous talks. We also need to get all the regulatory aspects right. And I'll come to this in a subsequent slide, but really that social construct is very, very important. And actually, it's there already, right? So there are metaverses today out there which are very social. I'm not sure how many of you are, let's say, on Minecraft. So my younger daughter, she loves Minecraft and she plays with her friends around the world. And after school, she would come home and connect there, and they would do things together. They're building wells, it happens to be, but they're also talking. So it's really that that social construct with a very deep social fabric, which is building there using these augmentation tools. So let's get that right. Okay. Second thing is, and that's really technology. You will see that something always happens when this triplet of applications, networks, and devices reinvents itself. So we've seen that with the iPhone. Okay, so the iPhone was really that device trigger, and you know, the iPhone didn't come alone. It came with an app store with loads of applications. And at that time, we were lucky enough to have a 4G system, which was, you know, solidifying now. And then we have 5G today. All three together really give us that internet on the run. So if we want to get that right for the metaverse, and we really believe in that transition from a 2D internet to a 3D internet, then we will need to get this right. So devices are coming. Networks are being get out, applications are being built. It has to happen together as an ecosystem. We can't push one or the other. Now, the third thing is that we will have technologies which will accelerate the uptake, right? So we don't really need them. You know, we don't truly need a Web 3.0. We don't really need AI. We don't need neuromorphic compute. We don't need quantum. But there are other technologies out there which will make that experience so much better, much quicker, and actually also solidify from an economic point of view. So, you know, the two I highlighted here are really Web 3.0 and artificial intelligence. And I'll talk about both of them, you know, in my subsequent slide. But I just want you to remember it's really about that social construct. It's about, you know, core technologies, and it's about accelerating technologies. Now let's look at the opportunity. Sitting in Silicon Valley, you know, I have to talk about money in one way or another, but I would like you to understand really that it's not all doom, actually. We have a really interesting construct cooking here. And I'd like you to focus on 3 parts in that slide. So the lower part, which is slightly grayed out, which shows the platforms as we are. And then we have a right-hand side and then the left-hand side. So let me talk this through very quickly. So on the lower part, you see that bulk of, you know, logos. And these are example logos. Of course, it's much denser, many more companies. And it's all about providing the basic platform capabilities at device level, connectivity level, and then from a rendering, gaming point of view, et cetera. Okay, so we have that block here. Now, on the right-hand side, you see a gap there, and then you see on top the applications, which we typically run if we have a centralized metaverse. So Fortnite, I'm not sure anybody is playing Fortnite or Minecraft or Roblox. These are big hits, right? So these are successes which happened in the past. And once they happened, you know, once Epic saw, wow, Fortnite's a big thing or Minecraft's a big thing, then they started to think about, wow, how can I monetize that? Okay, so the monetization question always came posteriorly, always after. And then you can buy assets now, you can trade things, but just within that very same platform. And that's all good, but it's a bit of a headache. Wouldn't it be great if we could do that natively? And this is where Web 3.0 comes along. And in fact, I see a new OC stack emerging, which is specifically geared towards, you know, the metaverse. And that's on the left-hand side. So you see a new platform level there, which is our blockchain level, blockchains like Ethereum, you know, Cardano, EOS, etc. Based on these blockchains, we don't build straight the applications. Okay, we don't do this. We actually build the value first. We build the tokens. We build the exchanges. We build the wallets. We build assets, NFTs, marketplaces, etc. So this is built straight on our blockchain infrastructure, and only then do we build the application. So let's look at Sandbox, right? So Sandbox is quite a popular, you know, metaverse, and it has actually internally a value token called Sand. Sand is based on Ethereum. So therefore, the Sandbox construct couldn't exist without the token, and the token couldn't exist without the blockchain. Whereas in the centralized world, you know, Fortnite, Minecraft, Roblox could perfectly exist without Visa or PayPal, which is why putting that value construct posteriorly on there is always a headache. So I see a future where Web 3.0 could really accelerate the native, you know, value taker. You essentially, an application which is successful automatically creates value. You don't have to think about it to then pull in, you know, the visas and the like posteriorly. So I think this is really exciting, and we need to start rethinking this. I think I'm the first one who has really seen that. You know, I'm going to write a big blog on this next week, so you can maybe read up on this a little bit more. But I thought I'll explain on this. So this is the opportunity. Now the challenge is really around ethics, privacy, and security. You have heard a fantastic talk about this just before me, and it's all spot on. And you know, I put ethics in there because ethics is actually much bigger than privacy. It's much bigger than security. It is really the way how we see the metaverse emerging as a social construct. What do we allow, you know, even from a perception point of view, to happen? And you know, I'm saying this because we as a community, as a tech community, we see incremental progress year on year. Okay, so month on month, yeah, you know, week on week, we read papers, we have conferences like SIGGRAPH or ACM, IEEE conferences, and new stuff is always being introduced, but often in an incremental way. And we kind of lose track on what we are actually doing there. And the first time I've seen this really hands-on is when I was at Stanford at the AI conference there in April, and we had a panel of very distinguished AI researchers. They presented their research, and one of the panelists was actually a psychologist from Stanford. And after the talk, after they presented all this stuff, which everybody applauded to, she stood up and said, you know, I'm not quoting verbatim, but she said, guys, what are you doing here? Okay, this is really from a privacy and ethics point of view. You know, she felt this was not discussed enough. I don't know whether she felt it was acceptable or not, but at least, you know, these are topics which we as a community normalize, and we need to do better than that. Okay, we need to really, as researchers, as techies, rewind, go back to zero, or try to understand where do we want to go. We need these conversations more often, more frequently. So therefore, that part of the ethics is super important. Privacy is a big issue, and actually, you know, we're trying to understand, can we solve privacy not at application layer, so not at terms and condition layer, but actually deep in the infrastructure. And that's what I'm working on. Okay, we call that privacy by engineering design, the same as you would. It's not privacy by design, so don't confuse that. It's privacy by engineering design. can the infrastructure, the internet, really the routers and switches actually make sure that privacy is adhered to? And the answer is, yeah, likely it can. The same way as a router and a switch today would not forward a packet which has not been secured. So can we put in the same type of mechanisms in that? And that is something I think we need to explore and really get right. So in the future, we don't have to take off, the T's and C's just to use a specific Metaverse application because our friends are using it. Now, nobody reads the T's and C's, and we know what happens thereafter. So therefore, making this an engineering proposition rather than an application layer proposition to me is very important. And of course, security stuff. I also would like to tell you another challenge we have, and that's all around regulation. Think about, the metaverses which are based on Web 3.0 are distributed constructs. There's no owner there. There's no single owner. So even if the regulator like Ofcom or FCC, on the boards of which I'm sitting at the moment, would regulate certain things on top of the metaverse or within the metaverse, to enforce that is not possible. How do you do that, right? It's just not possible because by virtue of distributed construct, you can't just really enforce it. You can regulate it, but you can't enforce it. So therefore, we still have a lot of stuff to do in terms of designing these metaverses. And I feel a lot of standards work will need to be done there, not only from an interoperability point of view, but also from an observability and regulatory point of view. So that's my last slide actually. Let me talk about the threat. And I think you will have heard about it, not only from the excellent previous speaker, but everybody before me. AI is not easy. And I would like to show you a slide here, which I've learned from somebody who I personally believe will soon get the Nobel Prize in economics. It's Eric from Stanford. His name is down here on the left bottom right corner. Fairly complicated surname, Brynjolfsson. Fascinating personality, solid economist, thought leader, a lot of clout here in the United States and globally from a policy point of view. So he argues, and it's something very new. He just put this out, read it up on his blog and on the Stanford website. We're doing it all wrong. We should avoid what he calls the Turing trap. And it seems, he painted the canvas of the world, into 3 zones. There's the zone A, which is that round circle there, which is really all the tasks we humans can do. In fact, we have been given millions of years to do that, right? So I'm just taking my mobile phone, I'm taking my glasses. I can do that in milliseconds. I do that really well. I can take an egg without breaking that. I can talk freely, no problem, right? So we've been trained on that. Then bubble B is really the human tasks which machines could automate. Okay, which maybe would make sense to automate, really, right? So these could be things like, you can come up with your own examples, but maybe mundane stuff like filling in receipts or driving me from A to B, etc. So things which really machines could automate. But it turns out that actually much of humanity currently focuses on, the tech community focuses on expanding bubble B within bubble A. So we try to come up with AI, which is able to replicate the tasks, which actually we have learned to do for millions of years really, really well. Okay, as simple as grabbing an object. You may have seen on these virtual reality conferences, people with VR headset trying to grab objects in the virtual space and not succeeding because we just can't get this right. Okay, so therefore, there's a lot of stuff which humans should continue to be doing, all related to creativity, the empathy, human engagement, and other tasks as well. Rather, AI should focus on augmenting our space. Okay, so go to space C. All the stuff we cannot do today at all, and have AI really help us to explore that space. So go really from an era where AI is replacing humans, so doing full automation, to actually going into an era where we do augmentation. And he argues that currently even our tax laws are not incentivized to do that. In fact, any owner of a company, I'm owner of a few companies, if you're incentivized to replace human labor, right? So all the tax laws go into this way, because if you employ people, they pay taxes. So there's a double taxation happening there. If you employ AI, this is not happening. Loads of other tax laws which incentivize using new technology. So therefore, you end up in a situation where we've actually been incentivizing, that transition from human labor to full automation, full replacement. Whereas what we really need is a societal reconstruct, really at government and policy level, to look at augmentation. How can we make it such that AI plays an instrumental role to expand our horizons rather than, making our world smaller? So, and I think these are very important guidelines really on how we would like to build the metaverse using AI. You've seen an example, how Meta, for instance, you can just say a word, using nerves, etc. So it's really advanced AI coming down, neural radiation field. You just give instructions and then the worlds are being built. Is that what we want? There's a lot of security challenges heard of. So we need to get this right. So, and I would like you to remember this Turing trap, not to run after AI blindly, but really use that as an augmentation tool to make this a better place. I'm going to finish here. And just if you're interested, we do have a blog which talks about loads of these challenges. And we do have a series of other blogs which have emerged, over the last weeks and months. And I'm going to publish one on the Web 3.0 economic construct soon. So that's really it. And I thought I'll leave that at this point, just really with the opportunities, challenges, and threats. And I'm not sure we have time for discussions, but thank you so much for listening, and greetings from California. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Misha, for a look at the opportunities and for accelerating the metaverse through AI and other emerging technologies. It was really interesting also to have a look at the value creation and monetization side of things. It's not something that comes up a lot. And also the ethical considerations and threats we should be thinking about, which a lot of the speakers have already alluded to. Fascinating. Thank you so much, Misha. So now we're moving on to our final speaker. Our final speaker is Ms. Melty Tantewanich. She is a member of the Global Esports Federation's Metaverse Council. She's an active contributor in the Web3 gaming space, serving as a creative and communications lead at Runiverse, which is a competitive multiplayer mobile game, which she co-founded. Melty has a background in IP purchase and distribution in film, TV, and video games, and creative tech integrations and activations at events. She was part of the organizing team at the Bangkok Comic Con and the co-founding suite of the Drop Zone Festival. Her expertise is in Web3 gamification and design, immersive world building, games, brands, and events, and community building. A warm welcome to AI for Good, Melty.
Thank you so much for that introduction. And yeah, this is my first time here. I know that we had Melvin from the Global Esports Federation here back in May, and yeah, I watched that whole episode. It was very interesting. So yeah, really glad to be here. And I'm gonna switch gears and talk about fun, basically, which is my specialty. Fun is something that all of us as humans pretty much need to, navigate through this life, whether it be Web 1, Web 2, Web 3, real life, metaverse, everything. Fun is, something very, very important for us. So my talk is going to be on how AI and blockchain integrations work together to create tangibly rewarding experiences in gaming. We're speaking about rewarding interactions on the outer shell, the outer layer of the metaverse, which is experience, specifically games. So first, a clarification. Good games are built with fun as the first principle. So technology, including AI and the blockchain, are features that we use in building. And what AI does, simply put, is it generates personalized and unique experiences. And then what the blockchain does is it promotes true ownership and transparency. So this means we'll be seeing non-biased rewards at a very, very large scale level. Everybody will be rewarded transparently, not just developers of games, publishers, and celebrity streamers, but everybody, especially players, which pretty much make up the gaming industry. So we're speaking about 100 million players on console and PC, and a whopping 2.5 billion players on mobile being rewarded at the same caliber that Spotify suggests music. So that's nothing a human can sift through and do manually and fairly. So fun is achievement in the 4 player motivations, and the blockchain and AI work together to create tangible rewards for all of them. These are activity drivers for humans. So these things are why we seek to enter any sort of interactive environment, which is what games in the metaverse are. What I want to show quickly today is the possibilities of the tech that Web3 game developers are working on right now to give the whole gaming industry a bang for their buck and time. So I'll be using my own game, Runiverse, which I co-founded as a primary case study, along with other Web2 and Web3 games. And just please keep in mind that I do come from a more creative background on immersive world building and a much less technical history. So that is all handled by my very talented technical directors and engineers, and I'm very happy to receive questions for them later if there's any. So the first driver is competing and conquering. So here I want to talk about database matchmaking algorithms. So matchmaking algorithms for players, factions, and esports teams in tournaments that uses not only the players' data, like on-chain levels for fairness, but also past interactions with resources to generate on-chain rewards that's appropriate for every participant. So in Web 2, we see matchmaking happening everywhere in online multiplayer games. So Call of Duty, Fortnite, all MMORPGs with dungeons and PvP matches. And in Web 3, the rewards can now be financial. So now that there's money on the line, it means that matchmaking algorithms have to be smarter and also more secure. And we've heard so much about security previously in this webinar. So yeah, this raises the level of quality gameplay that the developers must bring to the game, and therefore it thrusts us forward as an entire industry. So better rewards and better security. The next in this driver, I want to talk about player simulation. So players' NFT characters can be spawned as AI NPCs or bot players and progress on-chain even when the NFT owner is offline. So in a multiplayer match, whether by design or because there's not enough players at the time, we have AI bots spawn as either friend or opposition, and they have to simulate people playing them. This is actually a really, really interesting one because it's a relationship between smart AI, which is prevalent in metagames, and dumb AI, which is prevalent in core gameplay. So current game developers actually struggle with AI being too smart in games. AI tends to know the whole map. They know exactly where each player are. They just know everything, every nook and cranny. So it makes it a little bit, it makes it a bit of an issue. So devs have to get quite creative. So in games like Alien Isolation, they have 2 AI brains, one for the alien, but it can't be too smart. It cannot know the whole map. And then the other AI brain is one that gives hints to that alien. So yeah, we really look forward to seeing more and more innovation from Web3 game builders when, again, tangible rewards are on the line. And when tangible rewards like money are on the line, we see a lot of exploits happening. So this is something we're really excited to solve in Runiverse as well. The second driver is collecting and exploring. Here, I want to address smart land resource generation in games. So new lands with resources that are generated via AI using a set of rules and templates built by developers and molded by players. Collectible resources are spawned according to what the machine thinks the ecosystem needs. In Universe, it's incubators used for breedings and blueprints used for crafting and some rare crafting materials. But the AI has to take into account character population size, amount of crafting materials and items that are floating around the ecosystem already. Is the game lacking a certain theme of maps? Do players enjoy maps with specific features? Those types of considerations are taken into account by the AI to build a world on chain that is well-rounded, balanced, and exciting. So next one is personalized quest rewards. This is to do with machine learning. So machine learning can create personalized quest rewards based on player interactions with NFTs or SFTs that they've collected before. On the outer side of the core gameplay at Universe, we have a staking platform where it's called Camp, and you can see the purple screenshot right here. And it's where players can idly stake their NFTs to level up or go hunt for items and also open mystery boxes. So in a player's wallet, they may have a series of NFTs already that we can find patterns from, and the game can decide to reward them according to aesthetics that they like. In fact, style transfer features in AI tools like TensorFlow already do this, and this is also how AI art is created. The third driver is bonding and cooperating. So here, matchmaking, a different type of matchmaking, not for this is literally matchmaking like Tinder. Matchmaking and family resemblance topics come to mind. So in Universe, we have seasonal breeding. This is when the owner of the Rue character can collectively bring new NFT characters into the ecosystem with the help of AI, making them look within the family. The breeding system uses AI to find other owners, like Tinder, like any dating app, with similar rules to create AI-generated new characters, which are mintable as NFTs using convenient technology like Stardust. And then they're tradable in the marketplace with other players as well. The next one is similar, but a little bit different. The referral system can take a referrer's NFT character into account when the new player that they've referred is spawning their new character. So the game will give them complementing trades and tribes, which are the teams, and make it so they pretty much match each other or are influenced by each other. Inviting friends to play with us is something that we do by nature anyway. So it's super cool that now we can have AI technology and the blockchain show a sort of organic influence in characters that are created between friends. And it doesn't have to be just characters, it can be items and player homes as well. So imagine automatically being neighbors with your best friend in real life and having your houses match or complement each other. So that's really kind of like a dream scenario that landscapes such as the Metaverse can bring. The last driver is crafting and creating. Crafting and the player-owned economy is really, really important in new games, Web3 games especially. So OG games like RuneScape have shown us that the player-owned economies thrive in a really, really fun way. So players, the people who live within this fictional world, are the ones who dictate the markets by literally discovering materials and creating items themselves, akin to real life, right? At Universe, the team, we don't release any new items ourselves. We use AI to release resources to players to craft those new items on-chain themselves, and then they get to set the prices in a player-owned economy. So with AI and the blockchain working together on this, we'll be seeing really exciting movement in the crafting economy in this fictional world. It could be the Metaverse as well, where developers will have very little influence and can perhaps only step in to adjust drop rates here and there if things go really, really dire. But this will, of course, be each Web3 game developer's internal decision on decentralization. The last thing is player-owned map templates and suggestions. AI-generated base maps on NFT land plots, according to the player's most interactive map types, game modes, resources, and even partnered games like other universes. Players can then take the role of a creator and then tweak and decorate to their liking. So games like Fortnite, which has been mentioned a couple of times here, they do this really, really well because they integrate so many different IPs in their multiverse, so their creators have a truly wide canvas to work on. In Universe, the creators can produce maps, and then curators can test and rate them. So it's all done on chain because there's token staking involved and to be able to do these activities. So this is also kind of a form of governance. After human curators have done their job, another AI then can curate these rated maps for players to play in. And then everybody is rewarded when the map is fun enough to be interacted with a lot. So as you can see here, the blockchain is there to align creator and curator incentives. I know that I do have 10 minutes, so I'll close off soon. But of course, as a member of the Global Esports Federation Metaverse Council, I can't end without talking about enrichment for competitive players. So we all know that blockchain games are quite famous for having scholarship systems. But what if these systems are built specifically to level up competitive gaming? So Runiverse's lending system is tailored towards esports activities. We're exploring AI that intelligently pairs players with NFTs owned by esports teams according to their playstyles and game mode interactions. So esports teams, organizations, whale owners have NFTs for players to play with and share rewards with. So this makes it one of the most transparent management sim in sports. You could be an aspiring pro player who the game detects has a similar play style to the players of a certain esports team, and the lending system algorithm could lead you to apply to play with that team's NFT, so they can pretty much audition you then and there. And similarly, you could simply be an NFT owner who's looking for a player that will win incubators for you while they keep the blueprint, since you're interested in breeding but not crafting. So the system can matchmake for scenarios like this proficiently as well. So yeah, just to summarize, AI application at Web 2 level, just like any other fun game or virtual experience, can be elevated by Web 3 for ownership and interoperability, which is what the metaverse is. And I know we've heard so many definitions before, so I won't go over that again. But yeah, like I said, what we've gone over just now are both avenues of immediate exploration and imagined possibilities from the perspective of Web3 developers. So with the Web3 frontier, all achievements in one game can transfer to another in the same metaverse too. In fact, gaming companies are already exploring all-in-one battle passes, and this is possible cross-chain as well. So you can complete a task in a game on one chain and then see yourself progress in a game on another chain. So yeah, I know we have a lot to look forward to in the synergy of AI game technology and the blockchain and the metaverse. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Melty, for bringing some fun into the conversation, which is always needed, as you mentioned, no matter the space, whether real life or the metaverse. It's also nice to see that shift that you mentioned from developer to player-driven creativity in spaces like this. It's quite refreshing. So thank you. So now, after that insightful and information-packed series of presentations, we will now be opening up our Q&A session. You can use the chat function to address the individual speakers of the entire panel with any questions or reflections you might have about our conversation. What I'll do right now is we wait for some additional questions to arrive. I wanted to get started with a high-level question for all of the panelists. If you maybe could turn your cameras on so I could see you all. That question is, we've seen the topic of this conversation is the AI-powered metaverse, and we've seen multiple use cases and possibilities for the metaverse and how AI plays a role there. But I wanted to ask you, are there any use cases that come to mind for the metaverse that cannot be enabled to date because the AI just isn't there yet? And anyone can take this question.
So one of the use cases that cannot be enabled, it's probably not a very ubiquitous word, is intelligence amplification, where humans can potentially proxy other intelligence agents to make decisions on their behalf. This is something of a phenomenon where Neon project would be powered by such a phenomenon, but we're not quite there yet.
Excellent.
There are many use cases currently. Unfortunately, they are not on the level of quality of expectations or quality of service requirements, as I mentioned to you. There is a lot of room for improvements. And one of the use cases that it comes to my mind, maybe the next 5 years, the multimedia communication, that means all 5 senses will be realized. It's kind of like the metaverse, but more like towards the reality. So, and again, from the communications perspective, it looks like most of the colleagues here, except Misha, they're mostly focused on the software and also security and all that, and software development. So from the communications perspective, there is no way that we can satisfy those requirements in terms of data rates and latency, as I mentioned many times before. So I hope that within the next 5 years, we may try to achieve those. Why do we need those parameters? Because of the quality that we're expecting. I mean, there are now these HTCs and also these extended reality, but it's not for the fully satisfaction, to my knowledge, and a bunch of other challenges that we need to work together to solve them. I'm not touching base on security issues, even it's not my domain. So there are many other issues, as was mentioned by the colleagues here.
When it comes to use cases, I think it's a great question for the next years to come, because we need to ask them, not least because it will probably lose in some investment money, because investors always want to know. But really the end game, in my opinion, is we want the metaverse with all its adjacent technologies to be that next internet. Okay, and if I asked you today or anybody in the street, what is the use case or what's the killer app of the internet, you wouldn't be able to answer, right? Because it is actually such a construct already weaved into the fabric of society that it underpins everything you can think of. And that's really what we want the metaverse to be one day, at least a 3-dimensional social construct. So this should be our long-term ambition. So I'm actually not too worried about not finding this killer app today, because I think it will just emerge as a platform later on.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I think a medium-term use case has been the holy grail of the 3D graphics community for many years, is to enable the end-user content creation. It was actually mentioned, another presenter earlier said text to VR. I love that phrase. So we're not there yet. I mean, there also you can generate images, as was mentioned, but animated 3D and complete 3D environments, just typing a text phrase and getting there. It's something I think that AI will enable in the medium term. I'm looking forward to it. It's been something that a lot of people have been dreaming about for a long time, and it seems to be getting closer.
Excellent. Melty, from a gaming perspective, are there any kind of gaming use cases that aren't there yet because the AI has not caught up to maybe the creativity of creative people like you?
Oh man, I think this is a really broad question. I mean, myself as a world builder, I can imagine so many different possibilities, so many different things that the metaverse and AI will be able to achieve. But I honestly think, like, coming from a kind of creative standpoint in lieu with my technical game lead, everything that we have kind of like discussed is possible if we kind of, it's like the example of the alien isolation game that I said. Like, we want to make the AI dumb, but that's not really possible yet. So we kind of like make different sort of solutions. But I really do think that, of course, the biggest topic is AI sentience, which opens up a whole can of worms here. But that of course would be the dream, if we're speaking about NPCs and bots in games that are really, really realistic and really do simulate the human mind or even animal minds.
Right. And speaking of simulation, I wanted to ask maybe Ian, the new experiences that HTC can kind of bring to the table in terms of simulating all 5 senses. What sort of new experiences can that enable beyond just kind of the coolness factor, the gimmick factor of being able to smell and hear and touch and all these things?
Actually, gimmick is a funny word, right? So this is not a gaming issue. So we are trying to create this metaverse world, which is almost like creating a kind of like pseudo physical world, right? Because in the physical world, we can touch and smell and all these 5 senses. And that's towards that direction. We are in metaverse, but we want to create these kind of like physical world. And for that, first of all, we need to design and develop some sensors at the sending site. And there are some sensors, right? They can sense the smell, like biosensors and touch feelings and all that. But also at the destination, and through the actuators that they will display or recreate that in the destination. And of course, there are synchronizations, right? Because in the real world, we can sense everything like these 5 senses in a synchronized manner, and it will be not easy to synchronize them in this metaverse world. It's really exciting, in my opinion, and I think we will need that, really. I'm sure there will be many people that will say, why do we need 5 senses? But the world is moving more and more to these metaverse world with really creating the reality out there. So that's why I strongly believe in that. And there's also a huge market. Again, maybe it's outside of the domain of my colleagues here, like this hardware design and also the communication aspects is a fascinating objective for me, after 42 years in my career. And so that's, I will devote my last years to that progress, and I hope we'll succeed.
I agree. Very, very fascinating. Lots of use cases. Actually, in the last session, we talked a lot about the use of these types of technologies in order to enable marketing and basically being in touch with brands, all sorts of entertainment use cases. So there's the possibilities are really endless. And speaking of HTCs, holograms, maybe for Andrew or also Ian, what sort of identity protection or identity management problems do you foresee arising with the introduction of these types of technologies?
I will ask my colleague to answer it because it's not my interest or domain, like security, privacy, and all that. But there are huge problems there, honestly. And please, he should talk about it.
Well, I'll take a shot on the identity problem. So, as I said before in my presentation, identities are what hackers want. I mean, that's the holy grail. That's what they're after. So, protection of identities is probably at the top of the list for the metaverse. Is how do you protect those identities? How do you defend them? How do you know where all the data is? It's important to understand that identity is one thing, but authorization, authentication, and granting of access to things is something very different. And you can have identity stores in one place, but authenticate people elsewhere. And that's something that's kind of one of those nuances of security that I don't think always get really well communicated. The challenge with identity protection is that you get into one of the more practical problems of security, which is it's really, really hard to do security at scale, like extremely difficult. And identities, because they're under constant attack, and this is a good example of where AI actually struggles to detect all these new novel attack tactics. You have to have them in a place where you can, one, detect an attack quickly, but also remedy it quickly. So you need some pretty massive computing power, storage capability, and you need the ability to be able to act upon that data quickly. When you have an extremely distributed network where identities are all over the place and stored everywhere, that becomes really difficult to do. It becomes very difficult to be able to pick out the good identities from the bad identities. It's one of the fundamental problems with blockchain is that you can introduce. So identity protections are something that I think this is kind of why I brought up this issue. This is where the bigger players, the Metas, the Googles, the big, this is where they can kind of apply their might because they have that might. It's really difficult for the small startup to be able to put the kind of energy into that kind of protection because they just don't have that capability.
I think it's really fascinating. If I could just jump in on the identity thing. So, one thing I've been pulled into quite a few discussions with the United Nations and when I was still in London on the role of identity, right? Specifically in the digital age, and all the conflicts on Earth actually are identity conflicts, right? Whether these are physical conflicts or now moving to digital schemes. So therefore, the United Nations wanted to understand how the future looks like. So one thing I'm personally very curious about is that transition from what I call this era, the passport era, where your identity was your passport, and if you lost your passport, you were super nervous, right? So it's the end of the world. And your understanding of the environment was really kind of impregnated dominated by the way where you live, where you get schooling, your home, etc., your physical home. Today, we are going from this passport era and what I call the password era. So in fact, we have now digital identities and loads of them. If you think about it, each of us has a different identity now. And if I lose my passport, frankly speaking, it's not the end of the world. If I lose my password, this is where I really get nervous, okay? So therefore, that transition now is happening. How will this really, play out in the metaverse where really we will have different identities? Can a new type of identity crisis, an identity war, actually be stimulated? We know that ISIS, as an example, used the digital medium to really get a lot of stuff done, actually not in the physical world, but the digital. How do we prevent that? How do we regulate that? How do we enforce regulation? I think these are topics which should be discussed right now so we don't do the patchwork later on.
Jennifer, I'm sorry, while you were talking, I'm listening to my colleagues here. I was thinking, I just got this idea with these 5 senses that I think so. These will help us for the authentication, because each human being has a different smell, right? Unless, perfumize and all that stuff. Kind of like
my smell is my passport.
You can stamp them with DNA, right?
This will not work. Sorry, this will not work. I can tell
everybody
you.
has a unique DNA, right? Don't forget that. And this could also help to detect the person's real identity, like in addition to these 5 senses. So like DNA, actually, there's a lot of research going on DNA-based security algorithms and all that stuff. But that will be really like 5 senses plus like a unique identity for people that may help for the identification and authentication. I believe, but it's not, it's not my interest, as I told you. It will be good if some people will do that.
Go ahead, Melty, and then Kavya.
This really reminded me of, that movie Gattaca. If we're speaking about DNA and identification and security, we all know that in the movie Gattaca, they've already solved that. You prick your finger and it takes a little bit of your blood. Apparently, it's painless. That's how they do it.
Yeah. So I want to add to that. Ian is not quite wrong. At XRSI, we are conducting a research for NIST Institute around authentication for public safety officers, so augmented reality-based authentication. And we are actually investigating smell. We're investigating all 5 senses. So thus far, what we have arrived at based on that research is, in the security world, we have, the password, something then you have something you have, which is more token, and then you have something you are. In the metaverse, because of all the security issues, as well as, the data, etc., this is going to be flipped. So we've already arrived at that. We're going to proceed as the most trusted identity would be something we are, which includes smell. However, I would go with Misha too. We have not yet arrived at that could be fully proved used for authentication, but it could include all of the explicit biometric. So anything that we exhibit, EKG, EMG, and probably multimodal, because just one attribute may not be sufficient. So Misha, maybe combining the smell with something else, that could lead to that accurate authentication. But it is something that's being explored. I totally give that.
We're actually kind of crossing into biometrics and things like that. That's an area that I didn't think would come up, but one question that is kind of converging with this conversation is that I wanted to ask you, like, what additional privacy concerns does this endeavor into the metaverse raise? Because, are there things we're not thinking about? Are we actually generating new types of personal data that to date we haven't generated before?
Absolutely, yes. We are. Yeah. And that's why the human rights concern. So when we talk about traditional internet era, we talk about privacy, anonymity. In the metaverse, we've got to worry about our free will, agency, our autonomy of, am I the one making decisions, or is it something else that is already manipulated or on my behalf? So the kind of data we are capturing, the behavioral data, it could lead to absolutely losing our free will, especially in the metaverse, which is, a mix of digital construct overlaid on our reality sometimes.
Yeah, let's expand a little bit on that, Kavya, because you were saying in your presentation that the status quo for things like online content moderation and online safety is already bad enough as it is. How much worse can it get? Like, what are the things that we can't even imagine you think that could be happening? Because as far as I'm concerned, I actually kind of work in a space that's related to this. And what I'm seeing is that as much effort is being put into, AI, deploying AI systems for detecting all sorts of, nefarious acts online and social networks and Web 2.0, it's just not really working. So what can we expect on that front, and what should we be looking out for?
So I would base that on one of those examples that I've had to deal with firsthand. So back at Facebook, when they shipped Facebook Live, a couple of days after, they had to stand up 3,000 moderators because somebody was burning themselves live. Other people was televising rape and all kinds of nefarious things that, we were the third-party security team. Those are anticipated things, but there is no, there wasn't really a consideration of all of that. How do you mitigate? How do you moderate real life? And that's what we are up against in the metaverse. So some of these challenges really have to be solved at the cultural level. where you can't really constantly moderate every humankind that say the N-word. It's not TV. So we have to potentially even educate and, use the cultural upbringing a little bit to create better, incentivize people to be better human behavior, to be at their better human behavior. And moderation, I feel like it's a bit of a band-aid, that trust and safety. That is not going to work in its entirety. It is needed to mitigate some of that harm, but it is certainly not going to be sufficient. And if you do apply that, constant reality capture, the AI tools that Meta's virtual reality world is potentially proposing that will just monitor you, then you create this ultimate surveillance machine, the panopticon, where the prisoners are just always being watched. So we have to think about this a bit more deeply philosophically as to what kind of reality we want to live in. Do we want to be surveilled at all times? Or, and then what does that mean to create better culture?
Yeah, and who's in charge of it, right? Yeah.
I think, sorry, yeah.
Go ahead, Misha.
Yeah, I personally think that the threat is much bigger, actually, and I'm really worried for what we call the moment of singularity, and it seems to be very far off in science fiction, but actually we're getting closer by the day. Let me explain that. So, and very quickly I'll do that. If you combine digital twinning, so the ability to build really physics-like environments, in the digital space, plus you build robotics equipment, actuation, which can act on things, self-driving cars, robots, MEMS, plus AI, really advanced AI, we have transform AI now, really powerful. You put it all together and suddenly you realize that actually machines can learn much quicker about the real world. The one advantage we had as human beings is we live in the real world. So AI can do things as quickly as it wants to actually go out and then even take an egg and hand it over to somebody, is non-trivial for AI. But if we give it now the tools in the digital twinning space, with some real mechanics, and then they learn this to bring this to the real world, this could be an end game. We really need to pay attention to it. And actually, Neil's on here, your CEO is currently giving the keynote on what's coming. You guys have an instrumental role to make sure that this is not going to go the way how some people start feeling this could potentially go. And this would be endgame. There's really nothing we can do.
Yeah, I'm really happy that this topic is kind of bubbling to the top here, just as it is in the standards forum, because it is I think the biggest potential single point of failure for the whole metaverse and potentially humankind. I mean, someone summed it up well to me the other day. They were saying, because going into the metaverse, it's it's going to be realistic, it's going to be immersive, it's going to be where humankind first meets the personification of advanced AI, and there are a bunch of things that could go horribly wrong. If you think social media today is bad, you wait. If you don't get a handle on this, this could be the end of the metaverse, because people just won't want to use it.
Yeah.
Oh,
so sorry.
Neil, I do not believe that Metaverse will have an end. So it's really an open. No, seriously, it's not because we're all interested in that, but the next 50 years it will totally change our lives. Some of us will not be here, but. So I don't think that that's like a dead end. Absolutely not. I really.
No, I'm not saying it's a dead end, and I hope to see the metaverse thrive and be used for good. But no, it could go bad if we don't get a handle on
Very
this.
much so.
Right. Go ahead.
Social media already. A lot of people will argue that social media has already gone too far. I mean, if we're going to circle back to censorship and moderation, that is like the top form of centralization. So if we're talking about a metaverse where you can have the twinning, but also the opposite of twinning, which is going completely anonymous, we really have to look back at how decentralized can we really be when we're building things like the metaverse. I know that it comes down to an argument that is very philosophical and it's all about ideals of who is building this metaverse. A metaverse by the most common objective right now is built to be a sort of utopia, right? And then, so yeah, this also begs the question of just are utopias possible? Utopias usually end up being a dystopia. I've seen metaverse plans. This is one metaverse that is being built up. I won't name it right now because I don't think that they have announced that it's being built up at the moment, where they did cite as a value proposition that if you speak poorly or swear or say prohibited words, they will remove your mouth from your avatar.
Wow.
It's an extreme case. It's an extreme case, but it gives you a lot to think about in terms of this is very much is what films and TVs and video games have been showing us is a utopia that is actually a dystopia in disguise. And
wouldn't make the case though that shouldn't communities be able to define their standards?
Absolutely.
So my daughter went on her, she got an Oculus a while back ago, got online. She was online about 20 minutes and was attacked and assaulted by a variety of disgusting people who called her names and all sorts of stuff. I mean, it's 20 minutes it took. And she's like, this is gross, I want off. And, I told her, well, welcome to the metaverse. And that's the problem is there's people out there who engage in all sorts of abhorrent and disgusting and vile behavior. And the fact of the matter is that why can't communities define what their standards are. So why can't a community say, we're not going to allow that kind of behavior? And yeah, we're going to lock you out if you come on our site. And I mean, isn't that what Facebook and these sites already do? They define their standards. They say, this is allowed, that's not. You engage in this, you're out. And isn't that kind of like what almost all communities do? I mean, if I go on 8chan, I know what I'm in for. Yeah. I mean, I'm going there willingly. But if I go on a site for, for kids, that's, Peppa Pig, I don't expect to see, certain things. So why can't these communities define their own standards and enforce them? Should they? I think they should.
That is what we've been working towards for a very long time. I mean, we can look at communities right now, NFT project communities, they define their own standards. We can even look at compare Reddit to Facebook. Like Facebook, it's a very much like a one entity kind of moderating and censoring everything, or Twitter, up to whatever example we want to use. But then in terms of Reddit, we're seeing like already subreddits, people go there and they stay there where they belong because the standards of that community aligns with their values and their beliefs. So then that's what they identify as, like home.
Right.
But the new ingredient in the mix here is that you're not going to be dealing just with humans, right? You're going to be dealing with AIs that know more about you than you ever did. And they're going to be very realistic. They're going to be very empathetic. They're going to be very compelling. They're going to be AIs that you relate to at a very human level. And some of them will be good, but not all of them, maybe, if you don't get a handle on this.
Exactly.
About
so
weaponizing.
if I may just, kind of draw the attention to what Misha earlier said, and this is what is so critically important here, is not to constantly be fighting fires. We have to, and I actually did a podcast called Singularity Watch, where I would bring in people such as Misha and be like, hey, what is singularity? What happens then? And so what are we supposed to do today, noting down the fact that we are progressing towards the point of singularity? So just like Neil said, it's not just that we're going to be dealing with humans, we're also dealing with AI, and not just interacting, but it's learning. So we're literally putting all this that we are, the standards, the community, the culture, into that potential learning model that would potentially, inevitably lead to point of singularity. So I take this sort of like, when we devise controls today and think about this intersections of AI and the metaverse, we really have to zoom out to that point of singularity and then think about what are we supposed to do today to create that better world that's not going to lead us to that sort of AI that will be mean to us or annihilate us, or we don't have control beyond point of singularity. So what we do have control is this window of opportunity. So when we devise control, we shouldn't just be shooting from the hip and giving all our power to Facebook to control and mitigate everything how you deem appropriate. We should be owning and defining some of these things carefully, knowing that the point of singularity is going to come.
Right. I like that positive spin on things, and I'd like to take it back to kind of switching gears towards AI for good, not some of the negative impacts that we've been talking about, and kind of looking at the role of developing AI standards for the metaverse. Maybe we can talk to you a little bit, Neil, about this, the role of standards, kind of the way the forum has been approaching. We were talking before about what the definition of the metaverse is and how to build standards for a kind of undefined, as of yet, space.
Yeah, it's a really good question. Thank you for raising that, because a lot of people do find it hard to say, well, how can you have a metaverse standards forum if you don't know what the metaverse is going to be? But I think that the conversation we've been having, all the excellent presentations, and this Q&A shows that there are real problems and opportunities, clear and present, today. And so if we can not just be a talking shop, but be a cooperative forum where we can actually begin to do experimentation, plug fests, the pilot projects, and actually find real data. So we can begin to identify some of these problems and begin to identify solutions and help the organizations out there that are already working on all these kinds of issues to have better connection to each other and the industry. I think that can add value and move the needle. So we've been using the phrase, we don't know what the design of the metaverse cathedral is quite yet, but we know that we can usefully start to bake some of the metaverse bricks. So we know we're going to need them, and that's kind of the mindset that the Metaverse Standards Forum is adopting.
Excellent. A question from the audience, Sasha Lazarevic. He asks, I think that the most important question here that I don't know if you've addressed is how the metaverse will make people happier without having them consume more. If we want to achieve a sustainable society, we need to step away from consumerism. So how are people going to be happier on the metaverse?
That's a really good question. I think Nania could potentially answer that. She's the CEO of Trip VR, which basically uses, it almost is experimenting on how you can induce any kind of feeling into a human brain. So when you can on demand press button and get the feeling, I think one of those feelings would be on the top of the list would be, I want to be happy. In fact, VR is known now by research to induce all the feelings of potentially LSD. Any kind of psychedelic. These are research that are just recently coming out just this week. So I think those things would certainly be utilized to not go to a shopping mall to feel better, but maybe order happiness pill.
I think this is really important to understand that what Kaya just said. We need to redistinguish, the drug-like happiness and the real sustainable, persistent happiness. And I'm not sure how to get that right. So we want to avoid the digital addiction we have today, we see today. You know, the attention spans of people has gone down. I can say this as a former professor at King's. You know, I had to change my teaching style over 20 years because students would just not be able to concentrate for the 2 hours, which my 2000 cohort could do versus my 2021 cohort, right? So I have loads of open questions, and I'm really not sure how to get this right. The only thing I can tell you is that as humans, we are geared towards a 10 millisecond engagement. So the reason the eyes are right in the skull and not on the end of the fingers is because the optical signal goes very quickly in our brain and builds that emotional bond we get when we meet people physically, versus meeting people on Zoom or on Teams, where the codecs right now take 86 milliseconds. So we don't get that feeling of immediacy. So therefore, from a tech point of view, and that is to all of us, including Neely on the call, one thing is immersion. This is all VR, how much can we pump through? And the other thing is the immediacy, how quickly do we get it? So we get these emotional bonds right. So I think we need to get that basics right, get the ethics and privacy and the regulatory aspects right. But I think we really need to look at that happiness angle so it doesn't become an addiction happiness angle. The question is very good. I don't have an answer.
Okay, first Ian, who raised his hand first, then Melty and Andrew.
You know, almost 10, 15 years ago, I want to write an article, non-technical, what is the definition of happiness and what is the definition of success? It's really not easy because everybody has its, you know, his, her, whatever, own definition of success and happiness. So, like, for example, for me, happiness is, I used to play soccer when I was young, like ages ago, and I watch soccer, and it would be fantastic. You feel like you're in the stadium, right? So I just watch on TV, you know, and it's not the same like as if you are in the stadium. That will make me extremely happy if I will feel like I'm in, you know, London or whatever in England, in the stadium, or in Qatar. Now we will have World Cup, so I'll be close there in November. And another thing is about shopping. It was mentioned about shopping. I love shopping, by the way. Really, this is one of my hobbies, and was, you know. But you know, since the pandemic, and also I realize more and more, online shopping is much easier, much more satisfactory. You know, whatever you want to find, you just go and, you know, find whatever you want and you order. But with Metaverse, it will be much better because you will be like as if you are in the shopping mall or in the boutique, and you can try. It's a fantastic happiness.
Right.
Right.
Shopping is a hobby. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, any other hobbies that people may have. So, you know, that's the happiness definition. If the person who asked the question, he mentioned about the consuming perspective or consumer perspective. You know, we live in the United States, and also the world is following the US. Sorry about that, but you know, it's a consumer society. Like everybody, that's the entire world is built upon now.
Okay, Melty, you're next, and then Andrew.
Yeah. I think I want to give a really, really straightforward answer, which is the reason that we are building these interactive, immersive environments in the name of the metaverse is to broaden our horizons on what sort of experiences everybody can have access to. So I specialize in fun, and I think fun brings happiness, and people define happiness in all different sorts of ways. The 4 drivers that I brought up are just primary ones. I think at the moment it is up to the creators, the people who will be making these new experiences for the participants of the metaverse. Because of the metaverse, we have all these different possibilities, all these different things that you wouldn't be able to achieve in real life. And so that to me is us getting closer to happiness that was unattainable, happiness that you would have imagined and you wouldn't have been able to get in real life. So I mean, the question here is more, how real can we make it? How real can we make that feel? And that definitely, you know, goes back to what Misha and Javier was speaking about. Like, how real can these sensations be? Because right now, the metaverse or virtual environments are already empowering creators who want to show their art or show their experience or show any fictional works that they build without even thinking about consumerism or profit.
Yeah, just expression, right? Andrew.
Yeah, exactly.
I think Melty's onto something, which is about human connection and the fun it has. I actually want to invoke Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I think that's a good answer for this. For those of you from, from Psychology 101, right? Maslow's hierarchy of needs from 1943, right? You got to have physical, you got to have a house, you got to have food, you got to have safety and security, and then you got to have belonging, esteem, and self-actualization. Any of these digital environments have to embrace that basic psychological construct. You can't have happiness in these worlds if people don't feel safe. They don't feel like they belong. They don't feel like they can engage. Anytime you have blockers that don't allow people, that's when you're going to have the anxiety, the depression, and all these problems. So I think just acknowledging that basic principles of psychology are part of it. Let's get back to the whole reason the internet exists and the metaverse exists, and the whole benefit they give us, which is the ability to connect. Human beings absolutely need to connect with each other. And the metaverse gives us that in ways that the internet never could. And we just need to find ways to enable that and enable it in such a way where people can feel safe, where they can belong, where they can feel like they're able to belong, and that they can get the feedback that they want. And if you can do those things, you can start having fun. I mean, you look at there's a lot of sites that do this. I mean, I play a lot of Fortnite. Fortnite can be that. It can be a lot of fun. And part of it is because it is a relatively safe environment, and it gives you belonging. It gives you many of these things. So can the metaverse do it? Absolutely, it can do it. It's just, you gotta build it in such a way that acknowledges those key things that humans need.
That's great. Encouraging words from all of you. Good news. So I wanted to ask you, since obviously this is the ITU's AI for Good, a very important question is, how can the AI-powered metaverse enable us to address the UN's SDGs? Like, what applications are you seeing to address things like sustainability, health, education, the environment? Are there specific things that you can point to where the metaverse is doing a good job or has the potential to do a good job in advancing these SDGs?
I can talk. Go ahead, Misha. No, you first.
No, sorry.
Okay, I'll be quick. I mean, one of the most ambitious ones actually is for my own company, NVIDIA, but it's Earth 2, where we're trying to take digital twins. I mean, if we're going to make be a force for good, the metaverse is going to be a force for good in the world. It's good to connect it with the world. So digital twins, monitoring the environment and trying to model the entire Earth's climate is a project that is underway. And it is very interesting if you then compare that that level of instrumentation with AI-driven simulation and that kind of feedback loop between the real world and the simulated metaverse, and then you can throw enough compute power at that, you can begin to run the simulation at some level of detail anyway, faster than the real world. You can begin to predict the future, and I think that is a kind of a model that is going to be used in a whole different bunch of places. But of course, climate is one of the most interesting and urgent problems that we all face. So hopefully, the insights and the simulated environments and the science this will enable will be helpful for climate science.
Excellent. Misha.
Yeah, just very quickly. So in addition to Neil's great points, if you zoom out and think what the internet has enabled, the internet has really democratized, information. If we think about, knowledge being truthful information, then maybe knowledge not, but at least information. And then the question is, if you get it right, what could the metaverse democratize? And I think that is that social interaction. Because currently we can learn. The internet allows anybody in the world now to learn almost anything for free. But to actually action on this knowledge, to get a job, to be part of a design exercise, you still need to be at the right time in the right place. I can see this really well here in Silicon Valley, right? So, and therefore the metaverse is actually now becoming a haptic construct as well, and a fully immersive and immediate construct. If you get it right, it will democratize that whole, social type of engagement, and therefore open up the doors for somebody who lives in the very rural areas, or in somewhere in South America, to really participate in cutting-edge design exercises here in Silicon Valley. I'm just giving one example. So, we need to get it right. We need to educate. We still need a lot of education to happen around the AI metaverse. That takes always a long time. We need to get regulation right, but once that's right, I think that could be a really powerful tool for one of the SDGs.
Excellent. So unfortunately, we're gonna have to leave it here. It's been a fascinating conversation. I wanted to thank each and every one of our distinguished speakers, Neil, Misha, Andrew, Ian, Melty, and Kavya, for being with us here on AI for Good. And thank you for our audience and your participation. And we look forward to seeing you on future sessions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for participating in today's AI for Good session. We hope you've learned something new, innovative, and engaging in today's event. We now encourage you to continue the conversation on the live video wall in the neural network. Here you can ask questions, like and comment, share links, complete the poll, connect with interesting profiles, or speak one-on-one using the chat and video function. After the networking session, we invite you to explore the lobby, try the smart matching quiz, visit the virtual exhibits, poster boards, the e-shop, and build your personalized AI for Good program. Let's shape the future of AI for Good.